Okay, so hi everyone. Unfortunately, Facebook seems to have an 8-hour limit on its live stream, so we lost connection with Workplace and Facebook, which were our main broadcasting channels. So can we just start with introductions again? And I just need to then just send a link to a couple of people. So if you could then take the lead, that would be really helpful at this moment. But Sarah, if we could just start with you again. Thank you.
Yep. So hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a policy researcher with National Citizens Advice. I'm joining today because I've had my own experiences with mental health issues, and also have family and friends who have experienced those issues as well, and just think that days like today where we talk about those issues and the stigma surrounding them really helps. So that's why I'm joining today.
Hi, I'm Stu. I'm from the Help to Claim team, and I'm I'm part of the Norfolk team. I want to get involved because I've had mental health issues myself since 2005. I know there's a lot of information out there, and at the same time, a lot of it doesn't get through. And there's lots of things we can do to help one another. And so that was my inspiration for getting involved today.
Hi, I'm Tasha. I'm the training supervisor and help claim lead for Universal Credits for the local Havant Citizens Advice. I have joined today because I've also experienced issues with my mental health over the years, and come across a lot of negativity and bullying at some stages as well. And so I think it's really important to continue to have discussions like this. So hopefully one day having discussions around mental health is more normalised than it is at the moment.
Thank you. So does someone want to start us off on this session then, which I will put my ticker back up at the bottom, which is on ways we can help our mental health and well-being?
Yeah, so I think we had a bit of a chat over message prior to this, and we were thinking maybe we could start talking about what we're actually trying to achieve when we aim to help ourselves. I don't know, Stu, do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's worth remembering that we're always at different stages with our own mental health. And there's various different types of mental illness and mental health out there, be it depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, or psychosis. There's so many. And equally within that, let's use depression as an example, there is so many different stages within that. Some days when you're feeling more or less okay, days when getting out of bed is such a struggle. And so because of that, there are things that will be applicable to you one day that may not be another day. And so I think one of the key things is knowing where we're at that time. So whereas sometimes going for a run might be ideal, another time you may not be able to. So there's a whole lot of issues there about doing the right at the right time.
Definitely. Tasha, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I brought up an example of when I went to GP for depression quite a while ago, and it was like an automatic thing. So I've used to work with clients and in regards to mental health, and so I knew the kind of thing they'd bring out an IAPT leaflet to give you, and then they started issuing gym memberships. And at that time it was, I couldn't even just like get out of bed most days. I just didn't have the motivation to even feed myself properly or even take a shower. And he just gave me this gym membership and was like, if you go to the gym, because exercise is really good for your mental well-being. And I was in tears trying to tell him that I can't do that. And he just kept saying, no, if you do that, it'll make you feel better. And it's like later on in my recovery, that is exactly what I needed. But at that moment in time, I just didn't have the capability to do that. I wasn't there yet. So yeah, so I think there's different things that help at different stages. So I think it can be it can be a little bit not so much dangerous, but I think to do like a blanket thing where, like, you know, exercise is everything you need, or if you eat healthy, because sometimes you're not even at that stage. And I think one of the other things when we were talking about the aims of helping ourselves, we kind of sometimes forget that, like, mental health, when we are having difficulties, it impacts on our whole life. It has a ripple effect. It can impact on our jobs, it can impact on our relationships. So when we talk about improving our mental health, sometimes it's also actually getting our lives back.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the reasons I was drawn to asking this question was because I think it's one of those things that when you come to have this kind of conversation and within this kind of context, it seems kind of self-explanatory of what are we aiming to do when we want to help ourselves. We want to improve our mental health, but I mean, personally, I know in day-to-day life, when I'm trying to improve my mental health, when it's in poor shape and not looking good, it's often with the aim of other things, and it's often on a focus of, for example, being productive, or you know, doing well at work, for example, and actually that's completely counterproductive for me, because it just means I'm putting further pressure on myself to do these things that I'm not in a state to cope with at that point. So I think it's just getting back to those basics that we've discussed, and measuring yourself against where you're at, rather than that comparison with other people.
I think so obviously there are the employment side, and there's certainly the personal side as well. And I suppose there are different ways of supporting ourselves and each other through both of those formats. So I just wondered if anyone wants to comment on that.
I think for me, in terms of some of my personal experiences, because not everyone's like this, but I think sometimes when you're in employment or as an employer, mental health can take kind of can be pushed down the list. So there's often we need to be pushing our targets, we need to be making sure we've got X amount of staff, and we're doing whatever, and there's so much focus. And I think especially when we're in job roles like we are in citizens advice, where we are working with people, I line manage people who often say, I can't do this and that and the other, and I can't take breaks because I have to be there and almost save everyone else. And I think sometimes we forget our own mental well-being, and we forget that actually mental health is, I think, the most important thing for in regards to a manager for our employers, because if our employers are are breaking, falling apart at the seams, they're not going to be able to do the job we're employing them for. So I think that everywhere really could we're always learning, we could always do better. And I think it's really important to start looking at ways of implementing positive mental well-being into workplaces.
Absolutely. You do see it with some people that I'll work, and I'll get stuff done quicker. As in, then I'll be able to relax. But because they've just been constantly working, maybe 9-10 hours non-stop, they don't get to relax. So even when they get home, they're still wired. And I know with myself, when I've taken regular breaks and I get far more done, and also better as a result. I think we need to perhaps lead on that as well. A good manager will look after their own mental health as well as their staff. So look after yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I think there's a lot to be said for that as well, in terms of sort of practicing what you preach. I think it's quite difficult to feel comfortable as an employee to take those breaks, and to know that you can have that slack when you need it, if that's being told to you, but it's not being reflected in the people's practice around you. So yeah, I definitely think there's value for you as individually as a manager, and for the people around you and the people you manage in that.
I think it's become almost like people are almost kind of like seen as heroes or something. In some places I've worked, it's been like, oh, you know, you're the best employee ever if you work like 16-hour days or whatever. And I remember one place I worked at, like everyone was just doing so much overtime and acted as if they were kind of martyrs for it. And I was just like, but you are falling, you know, you're almost falling asleep in meetings. You're making mistakes because you're frazzled. And I always felt like I was doing something bad, because I would make sure for my own mental well-being, because I have burnt myself out before, to leave on time. And then when you're the only one leaving on time, it almost makes you feel like actually that's the wrong thing to do. And I think you know, where I work now, I very much do like what we were saying about practicing what we preach. So I make sure that I leave on time so that I can tell my staff off for not leaving on time in a nice way. If they're still like there at 7-8 o'clock at night, I'm probably like, why have you sent me an email at 10 o'clock at night? You know, have a life. But it was very, very new to my team. They're like, what do you mean have a lunch break? We shouldn't have lunch breaks. We can't have lunch breaks. I'm like, you absolutely should have lunch breaks. You know, you need to breathe and put kind of things to one side in order for you to, you know, be able to be productive and look after yourself. But yeah, my team at first were like, what, we can have lunch breaks? So yeah, so I get around that by going over to people and going, right, I'm having lunch, don't leave me like, you know, alone or on my own, come and have lunch with me. And that kind of encourages a reason for somebody to leave their desk and go out for lunch.
Yeah, I think that says a lot about lots of different areas beyond employment as well, in terms of, it just says so much about, I'm aware that the panel is meant to be discussing ways we can help ourselves, but ultimately if there's those barriers in place and the sort of support systems around you, or the context in which you're in, mean that that's kind of not facilitated, then that's a massive barrier to it. So while we're discussing ways we can help ourselves, it's also really important to see it from the perspective of helping others as well and facilitating that. So if you're in a position like yourself, Tasha, to be managing people and to have that position of authority to make those decisions, then it's great to make them that way.
I just wanted to
obviously there are other barriers. Oh, sorry, Jake.
I only wanted to quickly come in and touch upon no, and I've talked about it a little bit today, but in terms of ways we can help our mental health and well-being, for me it is just coping mechanisms. So actually if I do that, you can sort of see the Wales picture in the background. So I talked about this morning, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 4 months ago before lockdown. I work part-time mainly, so the idea was that at least one day throughout the week I can go and do stuff where it's not busy, and most people are hopefully, you know, then at work. I tend not to have morning meetings because that's not a good time for me, so I tend to try and block them out when I normally can. But I said part-time is probably the biggest shift, really, and obviously you can then afford to do that with the role that I'm in. And that flexibility, I said, then if I am having a particularly bad day and I've not got any other plans for my day off, I can swap those days around as well without feeling like it's a big deal and that I've then not done a day a week that I should be doing. So I think there's some things as well. Now we've got a comment here from someone saying, I was off work recently for 6 months with anxiety and depression. I've been back at work for about 2 months within retail. They tried their best with being supportive, but they do comment on them feeling tired or leaving on time, as Tasha was just then talking about, and feels the pressure to get straight back in to it is very pressured. I feel a lot of businesses are not taught enough about mental health and how to help.
Yeah, and yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, I used to, up until recently, write a blog and stuff on mental health awareness, and I probably rant quite a lot about how I think we all, not just businesses, but everyone should, you know, we all could be a bit more mindful. I think it's really difficult in that situation. You know, I've experienced myself kind of having some time off work and then returning. You almost end up becoming very responsible for your own recovery, which we should be to a certain extent. But when you're in a situation, you know, when you're leaving and you're almost made to feel bad about it. You have to be really proactive in doing that for your own well-being. I still need to leave on time, despite the fact, you know, of all my worries, because that is what's right for you. And sometimes, you know, I've experienced in the past, especially like going out and stuff, I can't go out and have lots of drinks all night stuff, because if I don't have enough sleep, I end up becoming really, you know, down and low for a few days and stuff. And I've got physical disabilities as well. So, but I will often like leave the pub and people will be like, oh, you're boring and things like that. And that used to really get to me. And I've now just had to just kind of be like, you know what, but for my own mental well-being, I have to leave, because I will be the one that suffers the next day. But it's really, really difficult, especially when you have had time off, you know, for mental health reasons, and you go back, and it's really difficult, especially when you've had a lot of time off, to get back in the swing of it anyway, and to have to like almost like justify why you have to look after yourself can be really, really difficult.
I think that's where employers need to be reminded that they have a duty of care. Yes. There's health and safety legislation, and that does extend to mental health. And although they'll look out for fire extinguishers and things like that, it's really worth remembering that they have to look after your brain too. So yes, you've got a responsibility to come in with a massive hangover, but at the same time, they can't place too much stress upon you, and they've got to make sure that you have adequate breaks and receive the support that you need. And I think we're a bit behind here in calling out employers for that. Stress and mental health is one of the biggest reasons for people on time off work now. So it does cost the economy, and this is where a good employer will be ahead of the game and will implement policies that will support people's mental health. And I think we just need to get a little bit better about shouting out about that. And that's where projects such as Time to Change have been very, very strong. And maybe we just need to do a bit more of that.
Just going into, I absolutely agree. And just going into kind of how we can help ourselves and stuff. One tool that I've used personally in the past, I used to work in mental health services years and years ago, so I kind of picked it up and utilised it myself, and I've recently used it with some of my own staff. But is wellbeing action plans. So they used to be wellbeing recovery action plans, but you can do them for work related. So kind of like just a few bullet points, how I look when what it means to, you know, or what it looks like when I'm well, what it looks like when I'm starting to go downhill, what it looks like when I'm mentally unwell, and what can you do. And as I said, I have one for my own workplace in terms of like, you know, some of the triggers and stuff, and what my manager can do. So on the days where I'm really flustered and might be struggling mental health wise, my manager will say have an admin day, so I'm not kind of speaking to clients or answering the phone. So I get like sensory overload when I'm like starting to deteriorate. And then, you know, putting those things into place to make sure that that I don't get to the stage where I'm really mentally unwell. So it's really important that I do have a lunch break, and that so my manager and my team know not to book meetings with me on my lunch break, and know, you know, unless it's an absolute emergency and I've had to stay in regards to safeguarding, I go home dead on time. If a meeting's overrunning, I go, because otherwise I know that I can just keep going and going and going and really burn myself out very quickly. So those types of things, it can be really difficult if your manager doesn't kind of know of them, to approach them. I have just literally gone to manager before, gone, here, I'll have a look at this. I'd like to discuss implementing this. And it can be really, really difficult to broach that. Especially, so, you know, sometimes you don't always have that great rapport with managers, but it can be a really useful tool to take to supervision and say, please, can we put something like this in practice? Because then they know that you know that there's something that they can support you with. And if you are feeling, you know, like things are struggling, you don't even need to kind of go through and say all this stuff. You can just say, you know, this part of my plan, can we implement this, because I'm getting to that stage now. So you don't even need to tell them anything. So it could be really, really powerful.
And clearly some support there from Ross on the comment section as well. I think as the individual sort of coping mechanisms I think are really important and helps people relate to those situations. Does anyone else have any examples that either you use or you know of other people using?
I think for me, I guess it comes back to what we've been discussing in terms of, Tasha, your example in terms of the action plan is great because it's that sort of proactive approach. And I think that's been one of the steep learning curves for myself, is not kind of waiting till breaking point or waiting until it gets really bad to implement coping mechanisms, to kind of have some fairly regular coping mechanisms throughout. And really, quite simply for me, in recent months, it's just been actually taking some time out to check in with myself, and to, I guess for some people it'll be things like journaling, to just kind of actually acknowledge what I'm feeling and what's going on, and then acting on it, as opposed to, as I say, waiting until breaking point. So yeah, just carving out that space. And for me, it tends to ultimately crop up in some kind of physical symptoms, so like breathing difficulties, for example, and I start to think I must have some sort of physical health problem, but it's actually just those anxiety, for example, manifesting before I've even taken that time to check in with myself. So in terms of taking that time and just thinking about it, and kind of leaning into those feelings and just trying to place where they've come from, as well as just looking after myself. And for me, that can be things like sort of writing and listening to podcasts, that kind of thing. So kind of leaning into those feelings, but not so much as to go down the sort of spiral with it. I guess it's getting that balance.
I think one of the things that really helped me in the past was with a former manager in a previous job, in that when I said about anxiety, we agreed that if I wanted to, I could just, well, as long as I wasn't in the middle of a call, I could just get up and go for a wander, come back 10, 15 minutes later. And it wasn't often I needed to, but knowing that I could meant so much more. So if I could feel it rising and I was getting anxious, I could just say to myself, if I feel this way in a few minutes, maybe even look at the time and set a time, I'm going to go for a wander. And knowing that I could just helped so much. And I think little things like that can make a huge difference in actual fact.
Mm.
I also think that sometimes having a good outlet. Sorry, Tasha, carry on.
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I was just going to say, like, please. Okay, I was just going to say, like, what I kind of, on the run up to doing this, I talked to a lot of people about what they do or can do in terms of mental well-being, and I've worked with young people before, and when I asked them what makes them unwell or sad and depressed, they reeled off so much stuff. And then when I asked them what kind of things they can put into place to help themselves, you know, be mentally well, remain mentally well, they really struggled with that. And that was like the poster that never got anything on it. And when we started talking about things, and people would be like, well, I could do yoga and I can do this and that, but when I'm in a classroom, for example, and I'm really anxious, I can't do these things. So I just wanted to mention as well, because, you know, some things like meditation, and you hear a lot about breathing exercises and stuff, which are brilliant, but sometimes when you're in that moment at work, for example, people don't like to highlight things. So I was just going to say that there's some things that around like kind of positive affirmations, or things like I used to have a load of mindfulness stuff, so that you can put them in your phone and just pretend that you're looking at your phone or whatever, and do those kind of exercises around just listening and, you know, all those senses. And there's other things like kind of sensory things. So I've got a load of like these that I just got on Amazon, and they do like pressure points. You can just sit there and just play with them, and they kind of do, you know, get a bit of that frustration and stuff out. And it's not anything really big. I could be typing away, no one really notices I'm using them. So there's lots of like little things that like sensory orientated things, or kind of things that just make you stop and just take that breather without kind of having to highlight too much, because that's, you know, some people do get really worried about having to ask for help or having to, you know, highlight in a busy office. Some people say, you know, I just want to be, you know, normal, whatever that is. So there are lots of like smaller things you can do. You know, I have to walk around one of these in my pocket, have my hand in my pocket. No one knows that I've got them. So there's lots of different things. You can be really creative with what works for you.
Yeah, and I think we've seen some examples on Workplace today and from the public social media comments as well around, as you said, people colouring, painting, doing all those different activities as well, things that are a bit more creative. But I also just think that there's lots of other things, isn't it? It just depends on you as an individual and what your sort of motivations and drivers are, because you know, for some people, blogging is actually quite a release, even if they're not actually talking about the frustrations that they want to talk about. Just the idea of talking about their day and being quite open. I know for me, the peer support course that I set up 19 weeks ago for CEOs and operations managers to sort of guide us through this pandemic was also what I would then class as helping my mental health and well-being, because it was a bunch of 60 people week in, week out that were facing very similar experiences to me in terms of the decisions they were having to make and the leading of other people. The you know, being able to relate to those and know that that was something I could look forward to and have an hour where you could just have a release was actually quite you know, motivating.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot to be said.
Also, you've then got time to yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry,
there's just obviously a delay. There's just obviously a bit of a delay on the connection.
Yeah, a bit of a lag. That's all right. Sorry, Stu, do you want to carry on?
No, go on, you please, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you said, Jake, that it definitely varies between person to person, and you can give your advice on what's worked for you. But that's one of the challenging things about mental health, is that although you can know what worked for recovery for yourself or for someone else, somebody else with the same diagnosed mental health problem won't necessarily benefit from it. But I think there's a lot to be said for a lot of mental health issues in terms of grounding, and I think that's where a lot of these suggestions come back to. So, you know, the colouring and mindfulness and things, and then what you're talking about, Jake, of speaking to people who can relate and sort of take you out of that sort of space that you can get into where you kind of don't even feel like you're in the room anymore, and you feel like you're just so in your own head that sometimes, like, speaking to other people that feel that way can be helpful to people. And I mean, what Tasha was talking about as well, for me, it's literally sometimes it's just like, I'm just going to put my feet on the floor and feel myself on the ground and feel myself in the chair and kind of peel myself off the ceiling, and that's like my first step to getting back to feeling whatever normal is, as Tasha said.
I think the other thing we haven't talked about, and I really wish it did relate well with me, but I've got friends that the gym is actually a really good release and they absolutely love and thrive going there. It's certainly the opposite for me, unfortunately, and always has been. But all those activities are obviously very supportive of people's mental health and well-being, aren't they? That's why they continue to do it. So go in the gym, swimming, running, jogging, walking, outdoors, all those type of things are really good for people's mental health and well-being anyway. And sometimes you just have to force yourself to go out. Don't you?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things for me has been at one point I was doing a lot of boxing, and that was so good for my mental health. You know, just hitting a punch bag or the coach's mitts, you know, that is such a release, and the endorphins you get from that are enormous. And you know, whether I started the day there feeling low or after work, maybe I'd been anxious, do that and it beats any antidepressant going. You know, so something like that I would really recommend. But again, it depends on the moment and where you are with, for want of a cheesy term, with your journey. But certainly, yeah, working out, whether it's running, lifting weights, or boxing, it's really helped me. Mentally, that is. I'm sure many would argue physically there's no difference, but I certainly know mentally it's done me the world of good.
I do think it's an interesting one. So on whether it's right for you again, though, because for me, for example, if you look at the weekend, knowing that this was coming up and having to plan for it and whatever, lots of procrastination and not wanting to sort of do it and face it. But when it was getting to 9, 10 o'clock at night, I was then able to just hammer it all out and get all of the stuff that I needed to get done. But I would much prefer to be a morning person. And I set my alarm for 5 a.m., wake up and just happily fall back asleep. But when I used to have to get up, so certainly when I was a politician when I was 18, but even recently where I've had to do interviews for radio at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, you sort of have to be up and you have to be alert enough to not just answer the phone in bed and then fall back asleep, because you've got to be on your game. And they are days which do tend to be very, very productive, because you're already up, you're already energized enough by the time it gets to 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So then you can have a really productive morning and often finish earlier because you've started earlier. And the day does tend to feel better. Whereas on what I would call a normal day, a typical day of mine, it is in the morning and probably early afternoon, it's sort of a bit of a drag. But actually when it's getting to late afternoon and evening, and for me, it partly is distractions as well, because when people are around, it is talking to them and trying to fix problems and chat through with people. But actually, when they then tend to go and those distractions disappear, you're able to be more productive and then feel more in control as well. We've had another comment from Ross just saying good meals also has recently turned to veganism. A plant-based diet is great for the vagus nerve, I think that says. Something to Google. But I think
yeah, I think it's really... Oh, sorry, Jake.
I was just saying, cooking and food is another way of people supporting their well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think personally, I always kind of shy away from any recommendations for mental health around exercise and food, just because one of my earliest experiences of mental health issues was a family member with an eating disorder. So I have that sort of acute awareness that it can, obviously they can be really positive things, but I think it's not uncommon for people to kind of fixate on those things and almost use them as a form of distraction sometimes, which so again, it's getting the balance right. And I can see that those things are very beneficial for certain people. It's just having that mindfulness and awareness that it's not right for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. So what do we think can be done in employment then? So when you are in the office and at work, what can we do to support our mental health and maybe of our teams as well?
So I by my previous role, I've always worked in young person services until now, and my previous role was in a young person's WIAC service, so advice and counselling information advice and counselling service, and I managed a Hampshire-wide children's counselling project. So everything that we did for our clients was around mental health, mental well-being, and again we try to get our staff to practice what we preach, because otherwise, we're dealing with other people's mental well-being, so we need to make sure our well-being is really good. So we had like lots of things, for example, in all of our team meetings, we had a check-in before we started. So everyone would go around the room and just say whether they're, how they're feeling today and whether they wanted to say anything. We had it was mandatory for us all to have peer support. So my team would have peer support once a month that was organised by their peers, so they could talk about anything they want and just get things off their chest. I attended peer support as a project manager, so we could sit and just discuss anything. Sometimes it was around, oh my goodness, there's so much pressure going on at the moment with all of our targets and stuff, and what can we do about that? And I think just by providing those safe spaces, not only to be able to offload those things, but just by kind of sitting there in team meetings, and again, it was mandatory at the beginning of every supervision before we do anything, we'd say, how are you and how's your well-being? It's just kind of, it's, we're creating a safe space for you to talk about it. It's okay to talk about it, and we want to listen and make sure that things are good. So everything we kind of did in regards to staff management was around making sure their mental well-being was there first.
Yeah, that's really positive, Tasha. I think I remember this kind of being said early on in the lockdown, but I feel like as awful as the current circumstances are, I feel like one of the few silver linings that has come out of it is that it seems to have been normalized to speak about how we are more, and like more of an awareness that people's mental health will be negatively impacted by what's going on. A lot of people experiencing a great deal of anxiety, whether that's in relation to their health or their employment, and that's terrible, and it's something that we need to be mindful of in terms of the impact that that's having. But the positive that's come out of that is, as I say, it's more normalized to speak about it, and I feel like people ask how are you in this context in a way that they didn't before. It used to be very much a just small talk question, whereas now there seems to be more of an expectation that you give a more substantive answer. And I know within my team it feels like people are more open to speaking about that in more detail, and feel more comfortable to be open when they're having a bad day or a bad week. And I think that's something that we definitely need to take going forward, as well as it's obviously a great privilege to be able to work from home at the moment, and I think that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of the coping mechanisms that we've discussed, because you kind of have your own space to do that. You haven't got the whole office watching you when you decide to go for a walk or when you decide to do some breathing exercises. And I wonder if that's something that we can sort of bring it forward, going forward as well, into the office and facilitate that in shared workspaces. As I say, I'm aware that that's a great privilege to be able to work from home and to have that flexibility. So if we could kind of be an example on that, and an example for other workplaces as well where that's not so normalized, that would be brilliant.
I think that's a good idea. And if we can perhaps recommend almost, and I say this half tongue-in-cheek, but half serious as well, almost a 11 o'clock stretch where it becomes normal that even if there's a waiting room, if we ever get back to having a busy waiting room, but where you do see a lot of the staff then sort of standing up or even from their chair, having a good stretch and releasing some anxiety. So, okay, people may giggle at first, but it's almost that, hey, I'm all right with this. So it's all right to have that time to yourself. Just moments to reflect, maybe not just reflect, but to even just allow a big groan as well. Or just, oh, I've had a horrible morning kind of thing. And I realise there's a bit Alan Partridge there, but nonetheless, it's just that opportunity just to have that that moment or two to get it off your chest, or to relax, or even hit a punch bag. I do mean a punch bag, not a person.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting when you say about the kind of group stretch thing. The place I used to work, we had quite a few people with different hobbies. So a lot of the managers were really into running, and we did a lot of running events for fundraising and stuff. And we had one of my colleagues used to be a children's entertainer, so was really into juggling and stuff. So we ended up having a running club and a juggling club, which were like really popular.
At the same time.
And it was just no, the juggling club, no, it would have been mayhem. The juggling club was mayhem anyway. After like several weeks, I still couldn't catch the balls properly. It was terrible. But yeah, so the juggling club would be at lunchtime. The running club would be on a Monday evening, and it's a great way to kind of just step out kind of, because we've talked earlier about, we don't take our lunch breaks and stuff. So because we have something to do, we'd all step out, we'd be doing it together, we'd be having fun. And it's not kind of homing in and marketing, we need to do something for our well-being, but we're doing something for our well-being and we're doing something together, and it's becoming normalized to have groups and kind of stuff and just a bit of fun and getting out of the office together. And that was like really, really useful. I mean, there was a couple of accidents where we're like banging our heads trying to catch balls and stuff, but it was a lot of fun. And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Laughter. If you can't have a bit of a banter and stuff in an office, I struggle if I can't have a little bit of a joke or something, because I think laughter is just like the best medicine.
I agree, and I think what Arca said, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, didn't we, on one of the other panels around, we don't have a space, do we, this year at least, where we're going to have a bit of a gap. And normally the summer is that gap. Some officers might argue with me till they're blue in the face that they're rammed in the summer, but most officers that I've been at, if you have a very sunny day, you tend to have less clients to deal with that day. And that gives you at least a bit more breathing space to do some other stuff. And we're probably not going to have that for quite a while, because demand continues to increase and people are going to be facing more issues in August that might not have happened in previous years at that point. So we sort of have to give ourselves, and the organisations have to give ourselves permission to be talking about this. And this is why we wanted to make sure we did this 12 hours, was to put it high on the agenda. My concern really is that we are going from a crisis to what's the new world, what's the new way of working, without any pause, without any gap. And that's going to continue to impact on people's mental health and well-being and pressure and stress and all of the things that come with that. So we sort of, as I said, need to give ourselves permission to have these conversations and to do things that, Tasha, some of the stuff you've just been talking about. But obviously also some of that does need to be done online. So how do we encourage that to then happen? I'd love us to do some sort of comedy club for Citizens of Ice, for example, on a live stream or whatever.
We could do a puppet show.
We did talk about this morning. I think someone wants to do I think it was Kate, about, she was reading the comments and she felt like she was on the news. We talked about hosting a Citizens of Ice Sky News type broadcasting panel. But we need to do things that are not as intense as our day jobs, but not clearly taking us too far away from our day jobs, because they are really important. The work we all do in the Citizens of Ice network, national, local, is really, really important with moving clients forward with their problems. And I think that's partly my observation of the charity sector is, although, and Sarah was talking about this before, Sarah Hughes on the interview we had earlier around, we're a very value-driven sector. Of course we are, because we have a passion for the subjects that we are working on. But we don't always then practice what we preach, and that's what we need to do. Is we need to recognise that we are here to support people, but to support people as effectively as we can, we also need to be on top of our game, and to be on top of our game, we don't have to be intense all day, every day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other thing about the charity sector and the kinds of people that are attracted to working in the charity sector are normally such like empathetic, compassionate people, which is wonderful, and it makes everyone really good at their jobs and what they do. But it also means that they kind of take things on more than most, and that's very exhausting in the works that you do when you're working in any local office, for example, and you're speaking to people who are impacted by these issues every day. And it means that I said it to my manager the other week, that I just feel like I'm so acutely aware of what's happening all the time. So I laughed when the news suggestion came up, because I thought, no more news. The news is bad for my mental health, because it's just work means that I have to constantly be aware of what's going on. And I'm very aware that I'm in an incredibly privileged position in the current crisis and things, but it is very mentally draining and exhausting. And I think, as you say, Jake, it's so important to carve out that space to remember that, to acknowledge that, and to facilitate some care within your teams and amongst your colleagues to ensure that they're not burnt out by this experience, and so that we are ready to go into whatever this new world is, ready to help people rather than feeling completely flat out after the initial crisis.
And I think someone said it a bit earlier, I can't remember who it was, but when I was talking about how someone thought the bed behind me was the grand piano, and we were having that conversation. But when I had a laptop, unfortunately, which broke in the when we had very, very good weather in April, May, it burned the laptop or something, and it's just broke. So I have an actual desktop computer now. But I used to enjoy sitting in the garden when we had really sunny days, and particularly when we were doing the peer support calls, because they were more informal. I was able to sit in the garden with an ice cream, which was often the case. And it did actually look too relaxing. But I noticed that actually that was better for my mental health, because it broke up the day. Because the morning I don't really want to go for a walk because it's too early, and I'm not a morning person, and I'll just keep repeating that for the rest of my life. And then by the time it now gets to, obviously I would normally be finished by now. Obviously we're on till 9 today, but I'm too worn out to go for a walk in the evening. And I do quite like it. That's why I like it when it's a day off. I can walk all day long without feeling worn out or anything. But when you're mentally drained from having to think all day and react to things and talk and answer things, then you're not feeling up to that. So I enjoyed the idea of being able to sit in the garden and do a bit of work and then come back up and do the meetings that I needed to do. And then that's limited us, unfortunately, by having a desktop computer now. But I think Sarah Hughes, again, earlier on, was touching upon this, that for some people who have been stuck in, for example, a high-rise flat with no access to any outdoor space, particularly during lockdown, if you were shielded and you had no outdoor space, people have gone through really difficult situations over the last couple of months. And it's also going to be hard to sort of recover from that as well, isn't it? You don't just bounce out of bed now and say, oh, thankfully we can go out and we're gonna go and do this. I think we're in for a really difficult, delicate couple of months, and I just think, although obviously we don't have every concrete answer that we could possibly have, I think just even talking about it and thinking about these things are just going to be so vitally important for us all.
Absolutely, it's going to be an interesting few months, and because so many services have been stripped down, a lot of people laid off, there's going to be new challenges, and we will of course be there to help, but by doing so we've got to make sure we look after our own health, because if I'm not so well, then it's more strain on you, and so on. And so we've got to find those areas where, if we are going to carry on working from home, we still meet for virtual coffee, as it were. Because in the past, you'd see a client, maybe go get a cuppa, see one of your colleagues, talk about football or something else. Could be new legislation, or it could be a gig you went to last night. You need that kind of interaction still, just to sort of have a laugh, talk about something different, almost like something to break it up.
I also think, and I'm just going to bring you up on the screen as well, if that's okay. Just nod if that's, yeah. Hi, Stu.
Hi.
So I think one of the things for me is, I was going to touch on this earlier on, but it just didn't feel like the right time. I remember, and again, I keep saying I remember as if it was like years ago that this stuff happened, but we'd have new volunteers or whatever in the office, and we've been trying to get them on an advice line, and they'd be a bit nervous, but you could have a chat with them and you get them on, and you throw them in the deep end, and they've done really well, and you can tell them. And you don't seem to have any of that anymore. So obviously then people are working from home, and I say this in the nicest possible sense, or then feeling like they don't know whether they're doing a good job or not. So they're feeling that pressure of, am I actually doing a job? Am I doing a good job? Am I a hassle? Am I a problem? And that's what concerns me as well, because obviously that also then impacts on your mental health and well-being. It's because we are isolated, of which I want us to try and continue the digital first type approach, because I think we are absolutely flying through more clients than we could do if we did this face-to-face. We have to recognise these other problems that are coming from that. And by not being able to just overhear someone doing a really good phone call or be able to debrief when you've had a bit of a chat, it's different doing that online, isn't it? It's different coming into a Google Hangouts or the Zoom call and saying, oh, that call was like this, and this. And quite often you can grab someone's attention, can't you, if you're in the office together, but you're still on the call. You can sort of just wave to someone and they can listen in and they can do whatever. I think there's a lot of that stuff that we're missing that is just making people feel a bit uneasy and a bit unsure about their own capabilities.
Totally, yeah. I completely agree with that, Jake. I think the threshold that you have to like contact someone over Hangout or over message is almost higher than it would be in the office as well. It's as you say, if you just finished a call or finished seeing a client, you kind of just turn to the first person you see and start talking about it. Whereas to be like, oh, I'm going to drop someone a message and talk through that, you kind of feel like you have to justify it before you do it, which I think is really not good, and I think it should be more normalized. But I think it's something that we need to think about. How do we kind of recreate that sort of environment digitally if this is how we're continuing for the foreseeable, or if we have to go back into this situation again? I think it's really important.
Completely agree.
One of the first things our manager did.
Stu?
Sorry, one of the first things our manager did when we went over to only digital and phones, she got us all on Teams very, very quickly, and we then used that all day to communicate with each other. First person to log in will say hello or whatever, and we'll have that, and we'll also use that sometimes to let off steam, share a joke, but also it's not almost like a virtual ongoing team meeting, so that helps.
We're just starting to roll out Teams across Winchester District. It'd be really helpful we're just trying to look at somewhere else who's done it, who get some learning about it, and some of the. I don't want to get too into IT and technology because I can't really talk about it because it's not my area. But I think that would be really helpful for internal communication. That's been a big thing for us, is trying to support that. But and I think Teams has lots of functions that we don't quite understand internally yet around that kind of just casual chat. And I think you can have things like you can have your office door open kind of virtually and office door closed and things like protected space so you're not available, but also allow people to know that you are available just to drop in and chat and think. I don't really know much about it, but it sounds like it's got amazing capability for this kind of recreating an office environment at home.
Yeah, I would say it's like Facebook, but an office version. You're not putting your holiday photographs on there so much, but you can certainly set yourself to busy, not available. But on the whole, it's almost like a big message board. So most of the stuff there will be about new legislation and about something we're trying to implement. But it does give us that room to then go, what does that mean? And, so we can all then comment further. So it's all into it anyway.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you. Obviously, we've just brought Charlotte and Sue on, who will hopefully introduce themselves in a moment. But are there any final comments from any of you, including Charlotte and Sue, but particularly Sarah, Tasha and Stu, on this topic then before we move on to the next one?
I just wanted to say that from my own experiences, but also when working with other people, sometimes because obviously when we realise there's a problem, we might get a diagnosis. Because for me, I didn't really kind of realise I was unwell until someone said, "Yeah, this isn't right." I wanted to get better straight away, so I threw myself into the deep end and tried to do everything, and then I just kind of fell back because I was doing too much too fast. So I think one really important thing is to take small steps, and it's okay to you're your own person, so don't look at anyone else and go, but they're doing that and I know they've got the same thing as me, so I should be doing that too, because you're not the same person. And if you're like when we talked earlier about there being different stages, actually, if you have got depression, for example, your end goal might be to be able to get out and go back to work. But if you've been spending the past few months not been able to get up and motivate yourself to get dressed, sometimes we can take those seemingly smaller steps as just that, as small steps that, oh, well, I haven't been able to go back to work yet, I've only just got dressed. That could be a major thing when you spent the past couple of months in your pajamas. So it's just like reiterating that for someone else that might be small steps, but in you know, when you're really unwell, actually that could be a major deal, and like you take every step at a time because you will build that up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, I completely agree with Tasha. I think it's all about being
put it better.
Oh, bit of a lag. Yeah, it's just about being compassionate to yourself, and I think that's partly knowing when you deserve help and support, but also forgiving yourself when you don't feel well, and in those circumstances that Tasha was talking about, where you're not progressing or recovering as quick as other people, knowing that people face different barriers to getting that help and that support. So you can't compare yourself to other people, because you know, even things like access to therapy, for example, it's a very disparate experience depending on what your circumstances are and what barriers you face. So be compassionate to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So thank you to Stu, Tasha and Sarah for another great panel. I'm really sorry, obviously, that we had that disconnection of the 8 hours, which we'll know for any future 12-hour live streams that we intend to ever do again. But obviously, it was then on YouTube and Twitter and stuff that people will be able to catch up on. So we'll be promoting it afterwards as well, anyway.
Thanks so much, Jake. Thanks for organising this. It's been a really good day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Sue and Charlotte, hi.
Hi.
Hi. So this hour obviously is then on poor mental health and leaders. Unfortunately, we haven't got Steve with us today, so it'll be the three of us. Should we just do quick introductions again? I'll just quickly start off. So Jake Morrison, CEO at Wokingham Sitting Device, and I'll talk a bit more about my mental health in a moment. And Sue?
I'm Sue Campbell. I'm the Chief Officer at Winchester District Sitting Device.
And Charlotte?
And I'm Charlotte Blizzard-Welch, and I am the Chief Officer at Stevenage Citizens Advice.
William, thank you. So I think for me, this was probably the one that I then obviously related to the most, because it was based upon the video that I put out that generated a lot of the discussion around then what more can we do to support people. And you know, we've been having the network leaders calls, the peer support calls of a Wednesday that have been quite popular. And again, just through the one-to-one conversations with people, a lot of pressure and stress has obviously been generated over the last couple of months, and certainly feels like there's going to be no way out from that over the next couple of months, because we've got much more work to actually do, and also to grasp a lot of the opportunities to make sure we continue supporting people. So there's a lot of that high pressure that we need to unfortunately maintain or live with for the time being. Mm-hmm. For me, you know, I've talked a little bit today around having lived with poor mental health for as long as I can remember, mental health challenges for as long as I can remember, suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts for as long as I can remember, and really struggling to get a diagnosis from a GP or any medical professionals, and going down different tracks. You know, so the latest one is about, you know, identifying a personality disorder and seeing whether that's the hidden diagnosis that exists, and then that might not be the case. But having to go through all of that and have all that uncertainty and not knowing the direction you can sort of go in, I think adding on that layer of then being in a leadership role, for me, I think there are positives with that, because the positives are arguably you've got a little bit more leg room, a bit more flexibility. You don't have a manager that's in every day watching what you're doing and micromanaging, hopefully, and that type of stuff. But on the other hand, you have a large team of people, which the three of us do, a mixture of staff and volunteers, that we need to lead, that we need to provide leadership to. And leadership can also be vulnerability, of course, we know that, but I do think we put a lot of that pressure on ourselves. But I think there are a lot of pressures that we just can't escape from. So, for example, you know, we've got funding applications to do right now, we've got funders to maintain relationships with, we've got risk assessments to do to decide upon returning to the office or not returning to the office. And those things are things you just can't escape from.
No, I think you're right. It's arguably easier to disguise in the roles that we're in, because no one's going to notice if you roll in an hour later or you are clocking off a couple of hours before. You know that you're always going to make you know, we're working above and beyond what we need to, but we do have that capability to hide.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else was talking about that in one of the panels earlier, about how they'd recently woken up and just hadn't slept that night, the night before, and just weren't capable, but they had the freedom to say, I don't even have to go and tell anyone about this. I can just change what I do today, and I can just kind of hide it. Whereas, you know, obviously we're in quite a privileged position, and not all of the people that work for us are in that position, and we need to be mindful, I guess, of that privilege and that position, and make that okay to have those conversations with others as well.
And I think that's what's challenged me is, and that's why I've been very open about it, is the problem we have is when you are a service delivery organisation that we're open 9 till 5, for example, or 10 till 4 or whatever, it's a lot more difficult to absolutely encourage that atmosphere, isn't it? Because actually you do need people to be in at 9 o'clock because that's the service that's then expected. But obviously, you know, I'm saying that with the caveat as you'd obviously hope that those individuals would have a chat with you and you would be able to figure something out. But I do agree with the point that I do think it's just far easier to hide and sort of carry on without needing to sort of have to address it. So I think I said it does have its pros and cons, absolutely. But I do think it's a really challenging position to be in. I think Sarah Hughes said it before, and I think a couple of people have said it in the panels today. But the chief executive role anyway is just naturally very isolating because there will be decisions that you make that people don't like and you have to be able to respond to that. Your role is primarily crisis management as well, and often that doesn't necessarily fit well in with a lot of mental health struggles that we have, but doesn't mean we can't deal with them, because I think the positive is it arguably makes you sometimes a better problem solver and makes you more understanding of situations that we're facing. But I do think it's a really challenging situation to experience.
Definitely. I think we've highlighted one of the main problems there just now is that we can hide it, we can move our days around, and then we expect our staff members to feel open to come to us and say, I'm really struggling with my mental health today, can I move things around? And if we're not nurturing that sort of culture where we're leading from the example and saying today's rubbish and I need to move things around, how can we expect the people we lead to do the same?
Absolutely. And Paul's just wrote on workplaces, this is where your permission slips help, Jay. So the permission slips I briefly touched upon before as this concept that I can't remember where the website was that I'd found it, but the idea that you give yourself permission to do something each day. So it's supposed to be a self-affirmation thing, but also a reflection tool. So we built upon that a little bit to do 2 angles. So one was a personal objective for that day and one was a work one. So what do I want to achieve in my work today? So it might be to get through my caseload or to clear my email backlog or something that is just getting on your nerves. And then the next one would be just something that was just for you. So clearing your emails is arguably a work thing, isn't it? It's something that work might want you to do, but what's something for you? People would say, I want to go and have my half-an-hour lunch in full because I don't get to do that normally, or I want to go for a coffee with Sue or Charlotte or whatever the situation is that you then to give yourself permission to do. And then on the back, or however you design it, but we did it on the back, you were supposed to just reflect upon that at the end of the day. So you would say, okay, well, I did clear my backlog, but then I wasn't able to take a half-hour lunch because I was trying to get my work done, or vice versa. You say, well, it took me a break, but then it's made me feel behind on my work. And I would then review them. We didn't do it for a long time, but I think we did it for about a month or 2. And I would just then review them and see if there were any trends. So the thing as an organisation we're clearly failing on here. So if everyone's saying, well, I want to take a break, but I've never been able to do it, and that's a fundamental problem with the way that we are set up. But if it's an individual that's saying, I want to do such and such, and then on the reflection, they haven't been able to do that, is that a time management thing for them? Is it something for them as an individual? So when Paul says, is that where your mission slips help? I think the answer is yes, because it would help start that conversation with people. So if it was I'm not a morning person and coming in for 9 o'clock is not great for me, then the mission slips was hopefully address that. And I think for me, it was about, if we're purposefully putting this on the agenda and trying to help, then I'm hoping that people are feeling that we're watching this matter seriously. You know, if we're putting this on to you and giving you a voice on this, then we're clearly interested in what your response to that is.
What did you find from that, Jake? Did you find any patterns or trends?
Not really, no, because people did have different perspectives on it. But certainly, I think people started to put down the same thing of what they wanted to achieve in the day for the personal objective, and that did tend to be interactions with others. Work stuff did tend to relate to whatever their role was. So if it was a volunteer with appointments, it would be, you know, my appointment to turn up and hopefully move them forward with their case, which I agree with. You know, all of those answers are still great to the permission slips, but yeah, the personal stuff did tend to be about being able to take their breaks, and it wasn't that because obviously what we were saying to supervisors is you need to make sure that they can take their half an hour break, and we need to make sure that that's done. But it was often that people were sort of dismissive of that, so they would be the ones saying, "Oh no, but I need to prepare for my next case," and typically advice. Lunch hour is often the busiest time, so then people would say, "Oh well, I can't because if there's a waiting room full of people, I can't really go and take my break." But actually, obviously, we need to do that stuff. So it's not just a nice little luxury to have your break. It's actually, you need to be able to break up your day. I've done it today myself. You need to just walk around and stretch a little bit and grab something to eat and get your energy levels going. But I said quite often that we need to sort of put that on the agenda.
I think that's really important, the issue around breaks and working hours as well. Partly talking as a part-time working parent, I think it's really difficult. And as a leader, there are issues around that, and particularly I think in the charity sector, there can often be this kind of assumption that unless you're working way over your hours, you're not really committed, you're not passionate for the cause. I worked for an organisation in London years ago, and when I was full-time before I had kids, and if you left the office at 5, you were kind of seen as not committed. If you were still there when the cleaners came around and you were being chucked out, then you were one of the hardcore, one of the committed. And I think we really should challenge that thinking, because it's really unhealthy for mental health. And I can't do that. I'm forced to stop because I've got children waiting for me at school or whatever. And without that discipline, I might well be working way over. And obviously in the last few months, all of that's gone out, all that discipline's gone out of the window. And I've had to work considerably over my hours, but I can feel that starting to affect my mental health. And about a month ago, I just came to the conclusion I had to get it for my own well-being. I had to get it back under control. And I've tried to encourage all of my team to do that as well, because I don't know about you, but with all of the senior team have been working considerable amounts of overtime for most of this period. And I'm really concerned about burnout around that. So I think as leaders, it's really important that we set an example around that and show we're going to stop now. I've taken my emails off my phone, which I wouldn't have thought I would have ever done. But a few weeks ago, I just came to the conclusion that I really needed to do that to give myself a mental break to look after my well-being. And I'm encouraging the staff to do that. I'm trying not to email them outside their contracted hours. Sometimes you can get, especially in the chaos of the emergency response and setting up. When we first went into lockdown, there was so much working outside hours. And I think trying to re-establish while we're continuing, I think you were mentioning before, Jake, about this situation isn't going to go away. We're going to be in this ongoing emergency response for an unknown length of time, and we need to try and ensure that our mental health and those of our employees are being supported. And I think ensuring breaks and ensuring people can work within their hours is really key to that as well. It's a real challenge, and it's particularly for ourselves, but I think it's really key.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, but I think it is a fundamental problem, isn't it? Because the question is, because even in a full-time basis, because obviously I'm currently full-time, what until next week, and then I'm back to part-time, which is what my agreement was in the first place, is the job can't be done in full-time in itself, can it? It just can't be. You couldn't do everything you need to do as a chief exec within the hours of their 7.5 hours a week. So then making that part-time as well makes it even more difficult. However, I say it because things can be done. So obviously it's about, well, do we need more resource elsewhere to make sure that things that I can't do in my time can be done elsewhere? But some of that stuff that you talk about around, I find it really interesting that you took the emails off your phone, because I do think that would be like the last resort for me. And I'm not like, oh, look at me, but that's definitely something I always do, is check an email. And I wondered if it instantly makes me feel better, but actually in the long run, it doesn't, because you're always switched on. But the idea of always knowing what's going on does make me feel more in control. So there's obviously an element of that. But I did, and we did this about over a year ago now, is we did stop people from emailing after 5 o'clock. And actually, we weren't forceful with it, but we were very clear that we didn't want people emailing after 5 o'clock. And that was driven by particularly volunteers, and that's not a negative, but volunteers would email and say, oh, I need this or I need that, and then staff would reply and say that, and I'd be getting copied into stuff at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be fine because I'd be working away myself, but I'd be thinking, this isn't what I want to see. It's not the type of organisation which has to have a 24/7 feel to that. And then we got into a good discipline where people didn't email after 5 o'clock. And what we did was we said to people, look, given that I'm someone who happily emails at night, or at least does the emails at night, because I'm a night worker and I'm more enjoy working and productive of an evening, then you need to schedule send your emails. So what happens is people, you wake up and you've got 10 emails at 8 o'clock in the morning, but I do feel that's better than drip of an evening and of night, when people are feeling, oh, actually, I need to just ask Jake this, or I need to ask such and such this. But actually, it just feels better that it is then done within those work hours. And it sets expectations on others that you don't need to be responding out of hours, because we've been very clear that we just expect people to be emailing within those hours. And it does sound pretty simple, doesn't it? But it did make a big difference. But then, so you've said all that did go out the window during the build up to the coronavirus pandemic, because my emails were then being sent at 7 o'clock. That was after the Downing Street press conferences, and by the time we digested what actions we needed to take, so it was inevitable. But we've got back to a point now where we're saying, although we're still in the crisis and we're still responding, we don't need that level of intensity anymore. So we're getting back to, so the WhatsApp group that we had was then locked down to announcements only. So we don't have that at 7 o'clock at night saying, what's my rota for the rest of the week? We've limited all that down. And just before, Charlotte, you come in, Paul's just commented saying, no email Wednesday is a dream of mine. I think that's obviously really interesting as well in itself. Charlotte.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you're absolutely right around there is not enough hours in the week to do our job. And I think, I think as leaders, quite often we can have double standards. So I definitely said to my chair last week when he said, when are you going to take some leave? And I said, what's the point? What's the point? I'd just be putting myself back. At least if I'm here, I'm keeping on top of things vaguely. If I go on annual leave, I'm just going to stress myself out. But I do think that that's the wrong approach. It's just changing that within ourselves is really difficult. I would say the best email footer I've ever seen, and I would massively encourage people to do it, is, and especially if we're trying to encourage this culture of encouraging people to work when works for them. So if you're not a morning person and you can, within the needs of the service, move your hours to, whenever they need to be, ending at 8, ending at 9 p.m. And it fits with the needs of the service, you can do that. But obviously that means that you need to be firing emails out when you're working. So whilst trying to accommodate that new style of working and not overwhelm those who aren't working like that, there was this email footer that says, it was something like, you may be receiving this email late in the evening. This is because it fits with me and the way I like to work, but it is no way a expectation that you should be doing the same or that I expect a response. And I thought, wow, that really sort of sets the expectations really clearly that that person's looking after themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's because and that's why I said we have this session as well, was about perceptions. It's our perception and that we have to respond because someone sent it at that time. But unfortunately, again, in the leadership roles, you feel a duty that you have to try and manage a lot of this stuff because that's the culture of the organisation then, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I think, we've spoken a lot as well around leadership and mental health and how we manage that. And a lot of the times we try and disguise that, but is it actually coming out? So I know that I will very rarely tell anyone that today's just a bit too much for me. but I know my senior leadership team can see it. And isn't that worse? Instead of me just being really direct with them and saying, today's not a great day, I'll be on top of things tomorrow, but for today, I'm just leave me to it. They just pick up on my stress factors and signals, and that's not a good thing. And it's definitely something I'm working on myself. But I think how do you balance that? I want to be shown as the all-round together person, but also be really open about when I'm not together and things like that. It's really difficult. It's really difficult mentally for us to put that across without feeling like we're losing face. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I guess it depends on, it's different teams and different audiences as well for those messages and how you present it. So internally with the senior leadership team, I'm trying to be as open as I can. And particularly when the pace just got too much for me about a month ago, and I was just in meetings, and pretty much every meeting with the senior leadership team, I was saying, it's too much for me. Is it okay for you? Is it just me that's feeling like this? Is it, I'm trying to get, and I think we all felt the same. And so we decided collectively to do, and I was saying, like, I'm taking my emails off my phone. I need to get on top of this. And I felt very, even though I'm actually really new, I joined in the middle of January, a few weeks before COVID hit. So one of the extra challenges for me in leading through this period is my board getting to know me as I respond in a crisis, and me getting to know my team as we all respond in a crisis. So nobody got to know my leadership style in a normal situation, which is really difficult, I think, for everyone to kind of, it's just an added element of difficulty for us, but I think we're coping with it really well. And then I didn't have those relationships in place with either my chair or my senior leadership team. I mean, it was beginning to, but we'd only known each other a few weeks. And now I'm having to have these conversations online and saying, I'm not okay today. Or my workload's too ridiculous this week, or whatever. And I think that's a real challenge, but I'm trying to do it anyway because I think it's really important. And then you have to think about where else. So we also have monthly meetings where all of our volunteers and staff and trustees come together, so we can have up to 70 people. And there I want to be open and transparent, but I'm also very aware of who that audience is and how far I would go with that. But I would talking about mental health and stress and the importance of well-being at that, but I'd be more careful. And then obviously externally, again, I'm talking about the pressure because I think people and funders need to know, but obviously you're very aware about the perceptions, I guess, and showing that all the time, especially externally, that you're in control of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think the interesting thing at the moment, though, is because obviously listening to that too, is that we're in a situation where most people can understand and empathise because they probably say, oh, I'm feeling that the same. The difficulty is, let's take it back, I said, to last year then, and you're in the summer or you're in December or whatever. And obviously it's then a lot more difficult to then be open and say, actually, here's what I'm now feeling, because people, and someone raised this before about logic. People want a logic behind why you're then feeling some way, and there might not be any rationale behind that because it's a mental health problem. So I think at the moment it probably is far more easier to be open and say, look, because everyone can go, oh yeah, I can relate to that. I've been stuck in my house for 4 months, or we're also pressured with the intensity of work. But actually, it's in the normal times that people then don't really understand, and they're trying to grasp why it might be that way that you are feeling.
Yeah, and it's all about how in tune we are with ourselves. So I know that there are times when I don't realise how far I've gone until I'm really far back. And my main sign that things are going horribly wrong is I start eating my dinner in my bed. For me, it's just a real sign you're not okay. But I know there's a journey to get to that point. And quite often I don't catch myself until I'm eating my dinner in my bed and I'm like, oh, I've got here again. Mm-hmm. And it's catching ourselves at the right point and then or getting to that point and then being able to talk about that in the right way. Because quite often at that point, we're not in a great place anyway. And you just go into protection, like protecting yourself, because that's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, one of the things that we wanted to sort of touch upon today is, again, particularly then CEO level, is we also have a board of trustees that we then sort of need to keep on side or keep up to date with things. And obviously, it's probably rare to have a totally in sync trustee board, isn't it? Because they all come with the different perspectives, views and drivers and all those type of things. So I think that's an interesting dynamic as well, is of course you have our line manager, but we have a duty to keep all of our board engaged and informed and on side, hopefully, as well. And that's obviously a delicate situation in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that balance between I'm letting you in a bit to understand what's going on here, to making sure that it doesn't go the balance of I'm not coping and I need copious amounts of support, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's just striking that really fine balance between letting people in enough without and probably a fear that we construct ourselves of people thinking we're incapable.
Yeah.
And this all stems back to stigmas which are shifting, but perhaps we hold ourselves to them even more than we should.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it does relate to anyone sort of talk to someone in authority or their managerial role, though, because I do think the fear is that it becomes official. If you then talk to someone who's senior to you, things become official, and unfortunately, I have seen that happen where it's then been took out of someone's control, and suddenly you feel like I was just talking about something, and suddenly it's blown out of proportion. I've seen more times than not, though, that it is a supportive, encouraging, genuinely good conversation to have, and people are quite surprised by that. But obviously, you can never be completely certain about what direction that conversation is going to go in. But I think obviously Sarah Hughes talked a bit earlier around sort of knowing what it is that you're trying to achieve by having that conversation, so that you can try and set that direction and tone. So certainly when I've talked to boards or managers before around this, which I obviously have, it has been to just say, look, I know far more about my mental health than you'll ever know about my mental health. So, you need to trust me in this. However, here are some of the things that is the reason why I wanted to tell you. So I said some of that might be, I might cancel a meeting, that's going to happen later on because I'm then not feeling up to it. But that's no reflection on you. It's no reflection on the organisation or even me. It's just actually a really difficult time for me at this moment in time, and there's no rationale behind it. Like, just go back to that logic thing, is if and it's not even a feeling that people do want to know why it is, because people want to fix things, and then again in somewhere like Sitton's advice, it's there must be an answer, so there must be an issue that we can solve. It really isn't. If a GP still can't figure out 15 years on what my problem is, then a 15 conversation with someone who has no mental health experience at all is really not going to provide me with all the hidden answers that nobody else knows.
I went through a major trauma 4 years ago now, and my manager at the time was Daniel Marshall, who was the chief executive of Stevenage, who lots of people within the Citizens Advice Network know. And when you go through such a trauma, especially, and I used work as my safe place. So I remember having a distinct disagreement with Daniel about how quickly I should return back to work. And I would leave it at the door and I would come back out. And then all of a sudden it started following me into work. And Daniel never tried to fix it, but he used to say to me, and I remember it to this day, he'd say, it's always going to be this bad. But then when I was having a good day, he'd find me on any good day and he'd say, it's not always going to be this good, to try and make me understand that even when I couldn't see it, the peaks and troughs are always there, and you're always going to face them, whether you're suffering with mental health or whether you're going through just a really difficult time. Those peaks and troughs are always going to be there. And if you live in your lowest moments thinking this is it, or if you take every good moment as I'm never gonna fall again, then you're in for a really difficult ride. And hopefully I've taken some of his examples of how he handled me forward to how I handle myself and my staff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm getting it right, because I think that I've still got a long way to go to not worry so much about losing face. And I think that Jake and I had a massive conversation about whether I was really in a position to join today, whether I could even contemplate aligning myself and my mental health issues with my job, because I can't most of the time. But I think so there's a comment that just popped up and said relationships are key, and I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. It shouldn't be a one-off conversation with the CEO, but it needs to be an ongoing building of trust, and obviously that's, as you said, correct. As well. I do think, talking about the culture then, which is where I hope that this helps the situation, because obviously, we're talking about leaders here, but I do believe that then, how you expect to be treated and how you treat other people should then relate to the wider culture of the organisation, and you'd hope that would then be positive. Is that, we're going to train, so thanks to Berkshire Community Foundation for funding this, we're going to train everyone in mental health first aid over the next year, following from September when the instructor course is done, and we're hoping that will give people a bit more of an insight into identifying some of those problems and responding to them and supporting each other, and just starting that off, because it is both colleagues and clients, isn't it? But it is also, I should say, partnerships. And Rosie was on this morning talking about that. Is partnerships is a delicate thing in itself, isn't it? And trying to get that right and supporting each other through there as well. And a bit of that vulnerability and a bit of that being raw actually could really be productive for some of those relationships, which is why I've never felt that I couldn't really be open about it, because I think where it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But, and that's just a shame for them, genuinely, because actually where it does work means we have far more productive, meaningful conversations rather than covering things up. For what reason, And I suppose it's a philosophical point, but we go back to that point of we do only have sort of the one life, and the three on this call work for the charity sector because we want to make a difference. And my values about the charity sector is it's not supposed to be a cushy little sector where we all have blankets and we all have a really warm time. It's supposed to be a disruptor. So if we're uncomfortable hearing from CEOs in the charity sector about their mental health, then we have an absolutely flawed society, because the charity sector is supposed to be the area that says, I'm not having this anymore, and we are going to bend over backwards and make sure that we sort this out. So if that are the experiences that, and whatever those experiences are, by the way, it could be any form of discrimination or anything else that exists, but we have to be confident enough ourselves to stand up and say, this is just something we're not putting up with, and then in our own organisation to be able to help move that agenda forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you tried have you seen the Mind Wellness Action Plans? I don't know if either of you've looked at them. Someone mentioned it on a call the other day and I had a quick look at it, because I thought of that when you were just saying then about having that supportive conversation with your chair or your board, because in that it's I think you encourage for all employees to fill it in, and it has things like saying what triggers what triggers what might trigger you, and what the signs or symptoms are when you're not well. Charlotte, you mentioned around eating your dinner in bed, but there may be things but there might be earlier signs that you could mention to people at work to say, when you see this indicates that I'm on that path a bit, I'm not that well, and you can have those conversations. I think you're encouraged to have those conversations in the kind of line management and use those plans so that you put them in place proactively ahead of time, so that people can see when you're beginning to not be well. And I guess it comes down to having the trust of that conversation. But I'm considering using that in Winchester, and I could see myself having that conversation with my chair and being, well, I've got a brilliant chair, I'm very lucky, and I could have that conversation with them to say, look, notice when I'm doing this. It could be that I just get frenetic on the emails. I think there was a point when I was like, before I took the emails off my phone, sorry to keep coming back to that, when I was emailing regularly at sort of 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and they weren't that well thought through. They were just in that kind of emergency response just frantic. And my chair did sort of say to me then, should we maybe not not always be doing that? You don't always need to respond straight away, take some time.
Yeah.
And that was a really useful pushback. And I think she reckoned, without me even saying that to her, it was quite an obvious sign that I was perhaps not as on it as I should be, and that pulling back and having a bit of space from emails in the evening was really important for my well-being, and it has really helped. But I think it's letting people know what those signs are and encouraging staff to tell you what the signs are with them, I guess.
Yeah, I do think the other thing I would touch upon is, and I think, Sue, I've probably said this to you, particularly with being new, but I've certainly talked to some of the national directors about this as well, is that it's really difficult, isn't it, for, particularly then CEOs, but everybody, because everybody's had to adapt to the situation, but through providing that leadership, which is why I then talk about the chief exec and operational manager type roles, none of us were interviewed based upon how we would handle an international crisis and how that would impact upon us on a local level. And none of us ever envisaged, I don't think I've ever thought in my life, I wonder what happens when we're all put in lockdown. It's nothing I'd ever thought about before. And we had to be able to instantly respond. And certainly my fear around that was whether people would feel that they have to leave because they haven't been able to perform, or they've compared themselves to others and whatever. Because obviously for me, a lot of stuff and opportunities have been based on local circumstances, haven't they? So, the one front door that we've offered, a lot of CEOs got in touch with me and were saying, well, I wish we had such and such role to play in the community. But actually that was based upon some local dialogue that we'd had at a really appropriate time to have. So there's been a lot of that comparison work that people have been doing. And we talk about, obviously, imposter syndrome, and that's something I've been open about on videos before as well. And it's based on lots of reasons. So I'm not going to just say, oh, it's because I'm young or because I'm this or that. But I do feel it a lot. And actually, someone who couldn't join us on the call today but did want to, we talk about this at the network leaders calls when we have a bit of a debrief, that until you get that call, you do feel like you look at Workplace or you look at LinkedIn and you look at something and you think that person's in so much control. They look as calm as anything. They look as, they've got everything under control. And you then start to think, well, actually, or you see a document. So, for example, I am really not good at policies. I'm really not good at writing huge, lengthy documents. I'd rather my policies just say, this is not happy, this is not good, let's not do this, let's not do that. Just keep it simple, rather than have 15 pages of why something isn't good and why something is good. But then when you look at someone who then can do that, you start comparing yourself, don't you? You just think, oh, well, I wish I could do that. But what I learned from talking to this individual was that individual who was good at this bit then was envious of somebody else who was a CEO who could do something else. And it's about understanding that we can't be everything, can we? The roles are so varied, and especially then in the charity sector, the three of us are running relatively small charities compared to the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
We can't be everything. We just can't be everything.
Absolutely. We are we're running management accounts and finances and HR and health and safety and marketing, and someone sent me an email the other day and said, please feel free to pass this on to your marketing department. I was like, oh, me again then. And you think organizations have departments specialized to all of these things that we do, and it's no wonder, when we can't be a specialist in all of it. Otherwise, what would be the point of having HR specialists or marketing specialists or accountants if we're like, hey, we could do it all in one day, all in one job, it's fine. And I think sometimes we do forget that. I remember distinctly thinking to myself midway through the pandemic, damn it, how did I get here? and am I doing a good job? And then I thought, the whole country's in crisis. Like, you can't be doing that bad. You're still providing a service. Not one day did my service shut. Not one day. And that my people are still getting helped. And yes, I may not be prepared for my leadership self-assessment, and I may get a red, and my a policy on something might not be up to date, but people are still getting helped, and it took a lot of work to get there. And I think I've been watching on and off throughout the whole 12 hours, and everyone says about being kind to yourself, but actually, as chief officers, I find that we aren't very kind to ourselves at all.
Well, that's why I was just certainly nodding on your point there, Charlotte, because I do think that's again another really key point is, you know, and we've talked about it a little bit in our own perceptions and the things that we sort of do to ourselves. I think there's a lot of comparison to other CEOs and other organisations that seem to be in a certain way, but it is just a really isolating role in itself, isn't it? Which is what's, you know, what is really important to remember is, I think for me, because there's another point that I did just want to add on to it, which is something that came up through. I was dating somebody who was in a senior role elsewhere, and we were both talking about the issue of never being satisfied with where you are, but actually when you move forward and then you think back and you think actually that job wasn't too bad at all, but because you're always got that nervousness around, and especially I said with imposter syndrome, you're just trying to battle your way through it, that you're then thinking, right, well, what's next? And then you get this next new job, which is also great, but actually what you had was okay, and actually you enjoyed it and things are okay, but you need to be able to sort of settle yourself, don't you, to say, right, this is okay. And Charlotte, you've talked about the LSA, which obviously won't mean much to people outside the network, obviously, but it's our quality assurance aspect, and obviously it is really, really important, but it is one of many other things that you have to keep on top of. I think for me, the concern, so we have like an annual planner that we've created, which is even the minor things such as when are the payroll dates, it's all in one big massive annual planner. So because I've always said, look, if I went off, I want to know that everything is in place for somebody else to just pick up and say, right, where are we up to with this? You know, I wouldn't want anyone to feel they've got to be on top of everything themselves, but it does often feel like you've got to be the one that goes, oh, suddenly we've missed this bit and we've missed that bit and we've got to get this in place. And you are the one that is then responsible for keeping all of that in order and keeping that going. And again, I said, if you are rational enough to sit back and say, can we do this? The answer is probably no. A lot of the time we are winging this stuff, aren't we? We are absolutely winging it to try and actually get through. And I think that's the problem, again, with a smaller charity, having to do everything that you just have to do to be a reputable, credible charity in a network like this. It's difficult enough in itself, but that's where we do need to encourage that partnership working within the network. So I think, you know, and Sue and I have obviously been having these conversations at length around the beauty of being part of a network and what does that mean, and how do we make sure that that is the best that it could possibly be, and those relationships are the best that they could be, because that's all what's going to be really, really important in ensuring that there's longevity in this and that we support people. Because my fear is, you know, we will lose people because it is all just so intense. And actually, a lot of us, you know, probably not me, because I don't think I could go and work for the private sector, but a lot of us could go and get better paid jobs elsewhere. But a lot of our driver for doing this is because we want to support our communities. And I absolutely, you know, and Charlotte, I know I've heard this from you, and Sue, I'm sure you will say the same, but absolutely love being a chief executive in the Sit and Device network. And I do say particularly Sit and Device because there are so many avenues that you can go down to support your communities that isn't wrong. You know, whereas if you work for another charity, of which I hope to do in the future, they tend to be more focused on an area of work, and you're far more limited in things that you can do because it's too much of a mission drift if you go beyond that. But for us, there is no wrong reason for people to contact us. We are here to support everybody. And if we have a niche in our area, and Charlotte, obviously, I know for you, the employment program that you run is obviously one of them then, where you've found a niche of an area that you are really good at and that you can make a lot of progress with. And I love all of that. And I love the idea of problem solving and being a bit of a plunger sometimes and unblocking things for people and then moving on to the next project. I'm not someone who wants to stay on the same project for years on end, but I do think we have to have a reasonable conversation at some point around what are the reasonable expectations on a chief executive. And that obviously then also extends to the organisation, because we are what the organisation needs us to do. So there needs to be that type of conversation, because certainly when I joined, you don't get a list of things which is, here's everything that we genuinely need you to do when you become a CEO. You get a job description that I don't think I've ever met anyone who says their job description reflects the role that they actually deliver. So it's a bit of a flawed system, I would arguably say. But we have all of those problems that actually you're finding this all out the way you go along. And when you add in a mental health problem to that, I do think that's where it really, really gets difficult. When you have a mental health problem that tells you that you're not good enough all the time or most of the time, when you have a mental health problem that twists, because I do say twist because that's certainly my experience and personally, is twists a good thing to be negative. You know, so I look back at the work that we've done over the last couple of months, and I am exceptionally proud of everyone in our team for everything they've done. But I promise you, I could very quickly turn that into a negative. I can very quickly turn it into, we've done a very poor job because actually we've done this, 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 and this, or we missed out this big project, or we didn't get funding from a certain funder that we should have easily been able to get. And it's really important to go back to, Charlotte, what you've said, which is, well, why are we here and have we delivered that? Yes. Well, we need to forgive other stuff, don't we? We need to forgive if I've got emails in my inbox that are from January that still haven't been addressed, because actually I've done my job. We've done our job, which is to help people. But I think it is really hard to just accept that and say, right, we're satisfied. And that's why I threw in that sort of description of the conversation I had with someone that I know around never feeling okay, never feeling satisfied. And then you only feel satisfied with something in history, not in the moment. And we have to be able to live in the moment and say, actually, do you know what? I did do a good job today and this week. And I genuinely don't think throughout the pandemic, you know, and you know, I did just laugh because Jill has just said in our private chat about me becoming a TV interviewer, which would be very interesting. But you know, at the end of this day, I don't think I'd sit there and say, oh, I've done a really good job today. It's been a really good day. I don't think I've ever talked to myself in that way before. And I do, again, put that down to mental health.
Yeah, I think I recall that so vividly with myself. You know, my team were going, we got this feedback, this feedback, this feedback. It was glowing. I'll be like, And this person was really upset because the weekly update was late this week. Well, that's it then, isn't it? I've done a rubbish job. And it was like, hold on a minute. It was 90% great feedback and 10% rubbish, but I'm definitely focusing on that 10%. Thinking of Sue's great tip around taking her emails off, and then your mention of the emails, I will share my new email handling technique, which has made a massive difference. So it took me about 4 hours to implement because I had about, I don't know, so ridiculous, like 40,000 emails in my inbox. Everything, I basically archived everything that wasn't current. So now I average between, if I'm on point and doing really well, I'll have about 15 to 30 emails in there. When I'm not doing so well, it'll go up to about 60. But it's a good measure of how I'm doing during the week, because at the end of the week, I'll look back and I'll be like, oh my God, no emails from this week, which clearly means I've stayed on top of them. They've been archived as I've dealt with them. But when you said there's emails there from January, at the end of the month, I will sort it by date because I'm a bit weird. I'll sort it by category. At the end of the month, I'll go back, sort it by date, and anything 2 months old I'll archive because clearly it's not important anymore.
I think it's a good point. But it just goes back to the issue of having to feel like you've always got to have an answer to everything, and you've got to be able to.
Yeah.
And I get into the habit of, I always read emails, which is why Sue, I was saying about your point. I know that I've read every email that's in my inbox, including throughout the day. I've had a brief skim of it. It's the responding to it that's a bit of a pain. And it's not because of what they've said. It's just the idea of, I've got to give a decent enough response, haven't I? People don't want to hear okay. And maybe they do, but I don't feel like people just want an okay. They want a date in the diary, or they want this doing, or they want that doing, or they want an explanation to why they're not happy with something. And Charlotte, as you've said about feedback, you know, I always want to try and give people an understanding of why something might have been the way it then was. And then quite often they actually don't reply themselves anyway when you've obviously explained yourself in those circumstances. But I think I did joke with someone yesterday because, again, I said I hadn't replied to someone's email and they just chased me up on a phone call. And I'd said that I do wonder, because obviously I've never lived that, and of the idea of not having emails to manage. And what was it better to be a CEO when there wasn't emails every day? Because you know, as I said today, there has been about 40, 50 emails. And a lot of them, obviously, I won't need to even know about. But would that have happened? Would they have all been a letter? Would I have still had to have dealt with them if we didn't have emails? Because I don't actually think so. And so there's all of that. But I do think that adds the pressure onto it. And it's probably, again, the same for everybody's jobs. But I do think then in the roles that we're in, you get everything and anything, don't you? You get the marketing stuff, as you've said, Charlie, you get the funders, you get the, and then you miss one. And that one could be a complaint, could be it could be sign this grant agreement by tomorrow or you're not getting it, you know, and you feel that pressure then of all of that section as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think expectations are really difficult because I mean, we think, you know, I could really down of not seeing that email. I was just FYI'd in. But then we sit down and really carefully construct replies, and probably the person we sent it to is like, for God's sake, I didn't need a response to that. You know, it's a continuing cycle, and I think you know that there is some work to be done around how emails have damaged culture, because there's an email for everything, and you're CC'd in and you'll be CC'd in, and some of them I get 3 times.
But
we're starting to. Sorry, Jake.
No, go on, sir.
I don't want to. I'm not an expert in IT, but I keep mentioning MS Teams today. We've started one of the projects that we're working on around supporting us as an organisation while we're remote working is internal communications, because we realised we needed to do a whole piece of work around how to improve that, and part of it is around reducing email. And someone said to me outside, I think he works for Boots or some other organisation, who'd said we introduced MS Teams and it massively reduced the internal email, and that, I think email can just be a massive time waster. We don't always use it for the right thing. So we've started to look at, when you're having a discussion with someone, email is almost the worst thing you can do, because everyone has to read the whole chain and it's hugely time consuming. So have a phone call. If it's just information giving, maybe email's right. What's the right channel of communication for what the kind of method of communication you're looking for? So is it discussion? Is it information giving? Is it just a quick Q&A? Is it, what sort of response are you expecting, and therefore which channel should you use? So we're trying to be a little bit more mindful than that and reduce our use of email, and that is helping. And I think as we roll out MS Teams, I really don't know much about it, but I think there is a lot more to be gained in terms of reducing our workload on those things.
I do agree, because that was roughly what I was just going to say around, you know, the national ones then that have got lots of resource to, I don't mean National Citizens Advice as such, but lots of national or much larger charities, they've got time and resources to allocate towards solving these problems, whereas it feels like for the smaller ones, you're sort of stuck in that cycle, aren't you? And what is going to break that cycle? But I just say chat and actually having an SMS, and not SMS, an instant messaging type function, which MS Teams has got, but so has Google with Google Hangouts. Obviously, we've been using WhatsApp as well. As you say, then should be clearing up that email chain. So I do think it needs that sort of bigger conversation, that bigger investment. But again, I do think it's really difficult, because obviously that feeling then of never being on top of your emails is another dissatisfaction of
definitely.
To be a very basic element of doing your job is something that you daily then battle with, is constantly having a backlog of emails to have to process. And then you feel like you're just managing your organization through the email. I may as well I could be anywhere in the world, as long as I've got an email, I could then manage the organization, because that's certainly what it then feels like. Yeah,
it's a definite, the out of control, which you just mentioned, 100%. And that's a contributor to really poor mental health, is feeling out of control. So actually it's like a double negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be looking to bring Sarah and Stu in a moment, but Sarah's camera's just gone off, so I don't know if she's gone, but they'll be bringing, oh, there you are, I'll bring you in anyway. Hi, Sarah. So if we then just finish off on the leaders then, so what would be your take-home comments from this panel or this topic? So we'll start with you.
I'm just trying to think. I think that there aren't any simple solutions, and that it's probably an ongoing conversation that needs to continue, because there's lots of these things around managing our time and emails, but mental health, as we've said during this conversation, is an ongoing thing. It's not just related to COVID, and it's going to be here afterwards. And managing that effectively as a leader is an ongoing challenge. And I don't think there are any simple solutions. But having this conversation about it, I think, is really valuable. And finding some way to continue that. And I think we are really lucky being in the Citizens Advice Network that we have these other chief officers that we can speak to. I was previously a chief exec a few years ago of a children's charity, and there was no one locally. I had no peers, and I found that incredibly isolating. And I thought at the time, maybe being a chief exec isn't for me because I'm not enjoying it. And I'm coming into this network and just beginning to experience these relationships is so powerful, and it's so different. And so I think we are actually really lucky within Citizens Advice that we have that. So I think we should carry on this conversation in an ongoing way amongst ourselves.
I agree completely. Charlotte?
Definitely. I think there's a lot for us to do, and probably more than an hour will ever give us to talk through and to come through. But I think it's just being really aware, like we've spoken about so many different issues today, that would we recruit people to our role? By the sounds of what we've all said, probably not. So it's just remembering that as leaders, that okay, well, if you wouldn't particularly recruit someone to your role because you're really conscious of how vast it is, maybe you should remember that when you're being so hard on yourself.
I completely agree. I think that's just a really important aspect of this as well. Sarah, you are on mute, but I just wondered whether you had any observations on leaders, because obviously, particularly in your role and you're managing volunteers as well. What do you think about mental health and leadership?
I think there are good leaders and I think there are bad leaders, and I've experienced both. And yeah, there's definitely room for improvement and recognition that I think we can all improve, and recognition that we are recognising actually, there is a problem here. And well, yeah, I definitely think there's areas that could be improved, certainly. And the fact that we're recognising it as an organisation has leaps and bounds, really.
Definitely. And then as Sue says, about continuing that conversation as well, which will be really important as well. We do need to fill these last 5 minutes though, so I'm hoping for a bit more wisdom and contribution from Sue, Charlotte, and then Sarah, if you can get ready for your wonderful little quiz in the next 5 minutes, that will be great.
I think the one other thing for me that's coming out of this is that I think, Charlotte, you mentioned that repeatedly through the day we've talked about being kind to ourselves, and that's really important. And I don't think we've quite come up with a solution to that either. But that is vital as leaders, that we're kind to ourselves and that we recognise what we're doing and the achievements that we've achieved. I've lost the ability to speak. The achievements that we've done, that we're all still turning up every day at the moment. Over the last 4 months have been brutal for everyone, but anyone, especially people in a leadership role, making your organisation keep going and keep responding, especially an organisation like ourselves where we're meeting real needs out there at the moment that have increased because of this situation. That turning up every day and carrying on that kind of trying to be calm and competent and show leadership is incredibly difficult. So I think we should really be kind to ourselves and focus on being kind to ourselves.
I think there's a really good comment that was sent via Facebook that touches on that we might have missed when we were in the midst of the conversation.
Which one is that one?
So I think it's changed at 6:39.
Oh, it's blocked you out, Paul. Do you want to read it out?
So I think touching on that, it's just about taking a minute and acknowledging that we are doing the best we can. Yeah, we might not always get things right. We might make mistakes, but that's what makes us human and aids learning and development. It's also fine to ask others with more experience around a certain area for help and advice.
Absolutely, as you say, it's a good description of the point as well. And I think that's why we set up the peer support calls, and they will continue. Andy will be chairing that tomorrow, which I hope to be able to drop into, and just anything else that helps create those conversations in that space. Because I think that's the other thing as well, really, of accepting it. Because I think that was the difficulty for me with shifting from another role to CEO, is what is a productive day and what's not. And actually, productive doesn't always have to mean something actually literally being done, such as a policy, or you've wrote this paper, or you've done this funding bid. The relationship building can be just as, if not even more, productive. You know, and I've always been very open about taking policies from other organisations, because why do I need to write it all myself from scratch if it's the same point that we were going to do anyway? And we can then invest our time in stuff that actually is then going to matter on the ground, supporting people, bringing new people in, bringing new projects in. But I think it's just that acceptance again of what is okay to do in your day. And again, I just don't think we talk about that enough as well. And think, obviously, Sue, that is why it might be interesting, and your experience of being a CEO very independently away from any other sort of network, because there's nothing to then relate to. But I don't think we have those conversations as well, which says, here is what a good day for me actually is. You know, and I think if you did ask 10 CEOs, or even 10 employees, but 10 CEOs what they've done in a day, I'm sure they would pick the most important, notable things that they've done in that day, and probably from yesterday, just to add them in as well. I don't think they'd be totally honest and say, actually, I spent a couple of hours just watching a video on this training course, or I did this just to recuperate, or, you know, I went for a walk and thought about how I'm going to put stuff in my funding bid.
I don't actually have a clue. I couldn't tell you what I did today.
No, that's a good point, but I do think, you know, for me, if I went for a walk for an hour in work, but actually I was thinking about what am I going to put in this funding bid today, it would probably be a much more productive, fruitful funding bid than if I just hammered one out now because I needed to get it done by 7 o'clock. You know, so again, it's accepting what is okay and what's not okay, and maybe again setting those expectations with the board. Okay, any final comment from you two?
No, I completely agree with that final points, Jake. I absolutely agree, and just continuing the conversation, because the peer support is hugely helpful, I think. Yeah,
definitely. You know, we will. I said we'll have that session in at 8 or half 8 or whatever, just to talk about what is next. Anyway, but we'll continue that conversation within the network as well. Anyway, so Sue and Charlotte, thank you very much for taking part today, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks, Jake.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Oh, I've just took the right person off. So Stuart and Sarah, so you're going to lead on the quiz for the next bit. So hopefully people are here on the quiz. And if you just want to introduce how we're going to run this and operate it, and then I'm going to come off the screen and hand over to you.
So we'll just run through the agenda for what we're going to be doing, which is in 2 parts. So we're going to do the first part on mental health quiz, take a bit of a break and a reflection, and see what everyone thought about the mental health quiz, and was it what you thought it was? Did it meet your expectations? Did it blow your mind with some of the answers to the quiz? Then in the second part, we're going to do a bit of a wind down general knowledge quiz. Yeah.
Should be good fun. Famous last words, but it should be good. And hopefully, you know, we'll get some people thinking as well.
Yes. So I will share my screen.
Aha, here we go.
Okay, so please feel free to take breaks as you please. Answer questions in the comments box. If there are any questions you would like clarity on, please again use the comments box. I believe that you're going to answer the questions either on Facebook Workplace, so we'll keep our eyes on that.
And have we agreed on the prizes?
Yet to be agreed. It's a surprise.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think someone said something about kudos or something, or they might win a game of monkey tennis or something, but we can't promise.
No. Okay, so it's going to look like this. So 7 to 7:15, we're going to do some introductions and our own experiences with mental health and our goals for helping others. Then 7:15, 7:45, we'll do the mental health quiz. 7:45 to 8 o'clock, break and reflection. And yeah, that should take us to the general knowledge quiz. Sorry, my timings are a bit off there.
It's okay.
So do you want to start, Stuart, about any of your experiences with mental health? I know you have talked some previously.
Yeah, sure. I had my first spell of mental health problems back in 2005. And I ended up having, I think it was 6 weeks off work with depression and anxiety. And that kind of opened up my eyes. I knew about mental illness, but then I realized I didn't really know much about it and how much it can affect you. And since then, I've been quite open about various issues relating to it. And I've also got involved one way or another in trying to support with mental health issues. So I've been involved with a charity that does work with that and taken part in the Time to Change talking events as well. And I see it quite often in other people. After I will speak about my mental health, quite often I'll get a private message or someone come up to me quietly and say, "Don't tell anyone, but I've got that too." And slowly but surely, more people are now talking about it more openly, and that's reducing the stigma around mental health. So rather than people having to feel they can't talk about it, they're now starting to talk more and more, almost like they would say, "Oh, I had a headache on Sunday after a big night out," or "I broke my arm last week, I couldn't come into work." It's now becoming more commonplace. And it's so important that we do that because talking about mental health helps. And on top of that, really, if you squirrel it away inside yourself, it's not going to do you any good. So the more we talk about it, the more we help each other and ourselves as individuals. So yeah, I've been doing it now for nearly 15 years, and it's a good thing to talk about anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I have quite a history of mental health issues. I was diagnosed in 2014 after a severe psychotic break that I had bipolar 1, which I don't think I quite understood the gravity of what had happened to me and my sort of how debilitating that was and how my recovery would look. 2020, forward the clock, and yeah, I mean, it's been a really rough road, and I think we spoke about it. We've covered quite a lot of my experience today in terms of stigma that I experienced. Not at the beginning, I experienced more when I was recovering and I was going for jobs, employment. Yeah, so it is definitely something I've previously not spoken about this publicly. It's been restricted to very close friends and family. And I think dealing with stigma did put me off speaking about it, but actually doing something like this and hearing people's experiences has actually made me feel more comfortable in sharing that. So yeah, I think it's definitely doing something like this is so liberating in terms of anybody suffering with mental health.
Yeah. That was the word I was going to choose then as you spoke. I thought liberating is the word.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
It does lift it.
Yes. Yes, and it shouldn't be, although there are roadblocks, box to having a career in and having mental health issues, it shouldn't put anybody off, because it is, hopefully within different organisations, it is spoken about and people are more supportive and there are improvements to be made. But having people within the organisations that do suffer with mental health issues is definitely a step forward.
Absolutely. I know there's one large company who there was an employee who was facing burnout, basically, and eventually opened up, talked to the CEO, I think, and told the CEO about his problems. And as a result, they changed the way he worked. And as a consequence of that, he's now become more of an asset to them because they've been able to tweak things and support him no end. And he's also then seen as like a beacon for like how things can be done. So it's not a case of, oh, you can't employ somebody with a mental illness. It's more that it can be an asset because, as we're going to discuss later on, it is so common. We all have mental health one way or the other. As we've seen with so many famous people who have come out with mental health issues. So it's just commonplace, really.
Yeah, and it should be seen as such. Yeah, absolutely agree with you, and that's awesome about the guy who is influencing change within his organisation because of his mental health. I think that's amazing.
And we can all do it. End of the day, you know, it's easier said than done, I realise, but once you're in that position where you can turn to friends, work colleagues and go, my anxiety is a pain in the you-know-what today. And they just go, yeah, I know what you mean. It's so much easier than suffering in silence.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's my experience. If someone said to me, you know, my anxiety is really bad today, I'd know exactly what that feels like, physically feels like for that person. And almost having had it myself, sort of how to comfort them, which is a big thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also if you start to get to know friends and colleagues who have got it, you also then start to learn what works for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Me and one or two of my friends, sometimes that will be like the trigger to give the other one some stick, almost, to sort of, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, and certainly not as in pull yourself together, but and I don't want to use the word banter, but it's almost that kind of thing that says, yeah, you may have anxiety, but you're still all right with us. You know, and despite that, you're still a mate, you're still that silly old whatever, but we're here, you know, and that can go a long way too. But equally, it's then knowing if someone's really bad, when to sort of go, ooh, do you want a cuppa? But equally, other times that sort of bit of stick can give that lift as well because you make them laugh or I start laughing, you know. So the more conversations, the better.
Yes, I agree. So we will move on to the quiz and question number 1. So what are the most common mental health problems? And I think...
No, I'm not 100% sure. I know you've probably seen the answers.
Sarah, I've just muted you. It's okay.
Okay.
I'll take you off the screen for a sec.
I won't say what I think it is in case someone then says, oh, I was going to write that down. Should we go on and reveal the answer?
Okay. So, Jake, do you have an idea what it is?
I'm assuming it's depression and anxiety.
It is. It's anxiety and depression.
Sorry, I think that there's a little bit more of a delay on workplace, so we might just want to give a bit more of a gap. someone has just wrote depression, anxiety. So I think there's about a 60-second gap.
Okay.
Sarah, do you want me to just remove you off the
Okay.
screen for a minute while you get the door? I'm just going to take Sarah off the screen while she just gets the door, Stuart. Do you want to? We can't go to the next question yet, can we? We'll just wait a second. But yeah, if we just wait, because there's a couple on workplace that are taking part, so we'll just give a bit of a 60-second gap. Okay, Sarah, I've brought you back up now.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, if you just give it about a 60-second gap for people to catch up on workplace.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Are we ready for the next one?
I'm just thinking, it doesn't really surprise me that it is that. It does seem to be the ones that people speak of the most.
Yeah, I agree. And it's almost becoming a norm, and it's a lot more.
Quite.
Yeah. And I think everyone knows, doesn't it? Anxiety and depression. For them, they almost certainly know how it feels. At some point, they must have experienced it, I would imagine.
Yeah, or they know of somebody who has. And again, that's partly through different people talking more frequently about it. So rather than it being, oh my goodness, depression, it's, oh yeah, a friend of mine had that. Or yeah, I had a spell of that 2 years ago. That could be tough. So that's good. Right, what we got next?
So question 2, how many people experience a mental health problem of some kind each year in England?
Now, I do know the answer to this, but I won't give it away, of course. As soon as I do, I know anyone who knows me will go, yeah, I was going to say that. And I'd be interested to know as well. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, sorry, Stuart, you carry on. Sorry.
I wonder if people will overestimate it or underestimate it.
So the first answer we've had is 2 million, and someone else has said 70%.
Okay.
And the answer surely is 1 in 4.
Should we have a look?
Yep.
Which is right.
I should be an honorary doctor, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I think it does surprise a lot of people how common it is.
Yeah.
And that's the ones they know of as well.
Yeah.
So it may well be higher. I think one estimate was that it now might be 1 in 3 as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, as more and more people talk about it, and there's less and less stigma, then yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you bang on with that. Okay, shall we see which is the next big question?
Okay. Question 3, approximately how many adults with a mental health problem are currently getting any kind of treatment?
So is this a percentage or a number?
Ooh.
Is the answer a percentage or a number?
Is the answer a percentage or a number? I can't remember whether I did it as this one as a percentage or a number. I've done a good mate.
I think it's a number. I can't remember what the number is.
So it was like the previous one. It's 1 in how many?
Okay, I see.
So the first answer we've had is 1 in 10.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Who's also then added not enough.
I'll go 1 in.
And someone else has said 100,000. So you got 1 in 12, 1 in 10, and 100,000.
Okay.
Okay, should we have a look?
Yeah, let's do it.
1 in 8.
1 in 8. It's low, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, all the amount of people who have got a mental illness of some sort, but not getting treatment. So,
Yeah. And I mean, although we could never explain why, because it's probably as individual as the person is. I mean, you do wonder how much of it is because of stigma, that they're not seeking
absolutely.
treatment. Mm.
Yeah, it might be something they're happy to talk about to one person or maybe part of a survey, but they don't want the follow-up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, as well as that, there has been difficulties with accessing mental health support as well.
Yeah.
That's something that, of course, has to change. So yeah, it's quite a complex position, I would say.
Yeah. My sort of experience of accessing mental health support is quite strange, and I don't know if it's shared sort of by anyone else, but I found that asking for help when I sort of didn't feel quite right was sort of met with, we'll take these antidepressants and you'll in 6 to 8 weeks you should sort of feel fine. But actually there was no follow-up to that. So in 6 weeks, having taken antidepressants and not knowing that I had a serious mental health issue such as bipolar, actually taking the antidepressants helped me sort of get to a psychotic point, because they never should have given me that. That was a lack of awareness. So I think accessing mental health is tricky. It's really tricky.
Absolutely. And sometimes, yes, it's almost seen as a panacea or a get out quick clause. Take these tablets.
Yeah.
And there is a time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it wasn't until I was absolutely at crisis point and severely ill did sort of real measures sort of be put in place. And it's a shame that it actually has to get to that point. But my treatment and my care from that point was absolutely amazing. Thanks to the NHS. I mean, they were really good.
That seems to be the common thing, that once you access the treatment that you need, it's very, very good. But sometimes finding the right treatment and then getting access to it can be a huge problem.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely been my experience.
And there's a comment here just saying quality of support also differs depending on your location.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, do you want to? Yeah.
Shall we have a look at the next one then?
So question 4, approximately how many of us hear voices that other people don't hear? 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 50, or 1 in 100?
This is what I do know the answer to. And again, I'm not going to say it straight away in case any family or friends are watching. No doubt they'll give me stick anyway. But it really catches people out, this one.
Yeah, I agree. When I actually looked into it, I almost was was shocked that I shouldn't be.
So,
but yeah.
So the two answers on workplace are 1 in 50, and that's probably the one I would agree with as well.
Okay.
Okay, should we take a look then at the big reveal?
Woo! 1 in 10.
Oh dear.
1 in 10.
It is so common, and that's the surprising thing. And I know a little bit about it. I've not heard voices, thankfully, but it can be for all sorts of reasons that you will hear voices.
Yeah.
And I remember I was doing a mental health. We did an art exhibition a number of years ago for mental health to raise awareness, and somebody quite old approached me and said, "Can I tell you something?" "Yeah, sure." She went, "Just promise me you won't call the police." And I said, "Well, as long as you're not going to hurt anybody." "I'm ever so sorry, but I hear voices at times." "Oh, not at all. It's fairly common." Unfortunately, we had some common it is, and she almost started crying with relief because suddenly she didn't feel like this person that's a complete outsider. She'd built up in her own mind that she was wrong and it was dangerous to hear voices and that she couldn't tell anybody. But then she was able to take that away, and she was then considering telling her children, because up until then she had so much fear about it, and that fear was worse than the voices. But yeah, it's so common, 1 in 10.
Yeah, and it's not, although with some mental health illnesses, hearing voices is a feature, it's not restricted to mental health illnesses at all. It can actually just be okay for some people.
Yeah, and again, it's not something that people are comfortable talking about.
No.
You know,
yeah,
we're making progress, but yeah.
Yeah.
So if anybody got that right, well done.
Yeah, yeah.
You win a Mars bar from me if you ever see me out. So
yeah, I was quite shocked at that one. So we'll have a look at question 5. Over the course of someone's lifetime, how many people are affected by suicidal thoughts?
Again, do you know whether this is a 1 in or a number or?
I'll just have a look, Jake. It's a 1 in.
Okay.
I think I know the answer, but
I think it's 1 in 6, but we haven't had any other workplace ones yet. So.
Okay.
1 in 4, someone has said.
1 in 4.
Close.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out that it's suicidal thoughts. 1 in 100, was that, Jake?
Yeah, someone's put 1 in 100.
Yeah, just to point out that it's suicidal thoughts, not that they're going to necessarily act upon them. But yeah, and there is a lot of help should you have such thoughts as well. So
yeah, and I'm glad you differentiated there, Stuart, the difference between the two, because I think so if someone's talking about suicide, they automatically assume it's the action, and yeah, it's not. Suicidal thought is quite different.
Absolutely, yeah. So shall we see what the answer actually is?
Yes. 1 in 5.
1 in 5. Yeah.
So whoever said 1 in 6 was close.
Yeah, I think we had 1 in 4 as well.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. There's some really good documentation out there about such things. If anybody needs support, I'm sure we can provide links later on. But there's a whole host out there. And also, if you've got a friend or family member who has mentioned such a thing to you, it's worth looking into. But at the same time, don't go into huge panic thinking that that's it, that's the end. There's some good advice out there that can help you and them.
Thanks.
And the 1 in 100 answers just said the distinction between thoughts and actions means obviously the answer's dead different. So
yeah.
Okay.
All right, what we got next?
So question 6, around what percentage of people in England suffering from mental health issues were also experiencing homelessness, substance misuse, and in contact with the criminal justice system?
That's tough.
Mm.
And I think there's quite a link between homelessness and mental illness.
I would
Not
agree.
that one necessarily causes the other, but
I think
certainly if you are homeless, you're going to have more difficult times. Sorry, Jake.
it's all right. So we've had an answer of 20%, and I probably think it's around 35%. We'll just wait a second or two more in case we get another.
Mm.
Around 50%.
Yeah, I mean, there's a definite link between stress and mental health issues, that if someone's already predisposed to mental health issues and they have an increased amount of stress, such as homelessness, it exasperates their symptoms. So yeah, they are interlinking
and also
things.
Yeah. And also, if you do have a severe mental illness, it can be much harder for you to access support structures, whether that's with your local council or other support places. It could be your anxiety if it's severe. If you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, what is easy for some people could be impossible for somebody else. And therefore, they don't get the help that they would need to prevent them from becoming homeless.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
40%.
Wow.
Also known
I didn't
as
think as high as that.
multiple disadvantage.
So heartbreaking. Okay, what we got next?
Question 7. Poor mental health is estimated to carry an economic and social cost of how much a year in England?
It's going to cost more than that Mars bar, isn't it?
Yeah. Quite a lot of Mars bars.
It's going to be in the millions, if not billions.
It wowed me when I was reading it.
So we've got 4 billion. I think it is something like 3.2 billion or something like that. And we just wait a second or two more.
Yeah, it's and I think this one is one where there's pushes the argument for more investment in mental health, because if you look after mental health, then it's going to cost less. So even though we should look at it from a humanistic point of view, if you take the economic point of view, it's worth investing in. So for me, it's a winner. Invest more.
So we've got 2 billion, 4 billion, and I think I said 3.2 billion. But my ace card would be, it could be hundreds of billions.
Okay.
I like those ace cards.
Let's have a look. 105
okay.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't expect it to be that high.
105 billion.
You know, it's staggering, isn't it? You know, it's and I know we can't cure it or prevent it, but with better investment, more support services for people, so they don't have to go through what you had, Sarah, where it was just have some tablets, so we can be more of a prevention rather than the cure. We save lives as well as money.
I think so. I think early intervention in the right way is where it needs to be at, rather than sort of treat what you think it is in the beginning, and then which could potentially, what happened to me, lead to a crisis situation in the end. You know, having caught it in the beginning, you know, things could have been different. Things might not have escalated as they did, really. I mean, I hope now, with it being 2020, things look a little bit different in terms of accessing help via your GP. So yeah,
we can hope.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Yeah.
Question 8. Severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or bipolar affects how many people? So this isn't a 1 in 4. This is like a figure.
Couple of my friends have got bipolar disorder. I'd love to know what their answer is.
Yeah, yeah. To be fair, I didn't have a clue.
It's not just you.
Yeah.
Someone's asked in the UK, but I assume that is the case. It's in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah.
I will just throw out, I do think probably around 2 million people.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess half that number. So just under 1 million, I would imagine. Still quite a lot of people.
So it's just said 500,000, and the other one is 2 million as well.
Okay. Let's have a look.
Nobody said 7. Wow.
Yeah, so Caroline got that one.
Okay, well done, Caroline. 500,000.
Yeah. It's a lot. And again, they are severe and can be severe, but doesn't mean that you can't still work or enjoy life. But equally, I'm not saying that they should then fail their PIP assessment either. Basically, you know, you can, with the right support, you can still do an awful lot. But it's making sure we provide that support.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it varies from person to person. I mean, not everyone with bipolar has the same symptoms the same way. Not everyone with schizophrenia has the exact same symptoms. How it affects them is a very individual thing. So one person with bipolar might say, actually, working makes me feel better. Having that structure
absolutely
actually works for me. But then someone else may say, I just can't get up in the morning. There are some mornings I just can't function. And that's okay. That has to be okay.
Absolutely. And I think it's that learning of it as well. One of my friends, I won't name the person, but has a very high-ranking job. And that helps them enormously. And they're a credit to the company they work for. But part of that is that they're quite open about it as well. And luckily, they've got a supportive employer. So again, it goes back to, with the right conditions and right support, things can be good. But again, it's all individualistic as well.
Yeah. Question 9. SMI refers to what in mental health? And name 2 of them. That they have been mentioned before in this quiz. fine. It's not a trick.
And it doesn't mean sensitive measles information either, does it?
No.
No, just testing.
So someone said severe mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's named any yet.
Okay.
It's interesting because I think even though we're showing that they are more common than we realise, they're still not part of the everyday talk, are they? It's good that we're able to more talk about depression and anxiety, but we need to kind of get to that next stage where people can talk about their psychosis and other illnesses as well.
Yeah, I think psychosis is a tricky one because I think people, well, when I've told people in the past, just one person, they said, is it psycho? And I'm like, no, it's really not the same thing. Do you know? And I think there is that media stigma around that.
Yeah.
And even though the worlds apart, it's got a media stigma to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfair
so
because
some of the answers.
Sorry, Jake.
Go on, Jake.
So some of the answers are schizophrenia, psychosis, and bipolar.
So
I think they're good answers.
I do.
Let's have a look.
And someone else just said multiple personality disorder. Well, personality disorders fall under that as well, don't they?
That's one too. Yeah. To the term psycho, I think the film didn't help there in that there's this myth that people or psychosis are going to act in that way, but it's not the case at all. And you can have something like that and, you're not a murderer or anything like that. It can mean so many different things. And I'm guilty of it at football when I used to chant for a player who we nicknamed Psycho. And then I learned better. So it's that whole thing of, we need to perhaps get that out there a little bit more, what that term actually means. And it's not a case of being politically correct or anything like that, but just so that people who do have that diagnosis aren't then labelled wrongly as someone that's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah. I mean, my psychosis is very typical, I believe, when I've spoken to people. I mean, mine can vary from daydreaming a lot to actually not knowing whether I'm awake or asleep in symptoms. So it can feel like everything's a bit of a dream.
Yeah.
That's sort of, but it's not massively debilitating now. Actually, when I had a psychotic break, that was particularly debilitating. But on a day-to-day basis, it's actually just daydreaming for me.
Goes to show how varied it can be,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the last one. People with SMI's average life expectancy decreases by how many years?
The answer should be there's no difference, but we know there is a difference because the question's asked. But as well as that, I do know that it does decrease considerably.
Yeah, and it's
sadly.
So someone's just said 10 and someone's just said 20. And I think Sarah did say before up to 20 years. So I'm certainly expecting that to be near the answer.
So 15 to 20 years, they have a pre-pregnancy mortality rate. Yeah.
That's Yeah. What can you say?
And I think, again, that was based upon other things, wasn't it, on comorbidity, but also factors that people are faced with,
So
such as homelessness and poverty. And
absolutely. So that sort of links in. And then coping mechanisms, you know, do they have an awareness of things like mindfulness techniques and stuff like that? Because I wouldn't imagine they do. And then bring in access into mental health can be problematic, getting the right support at the right time. So yeah, 15 to 20 years when you think about it, actually, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if anybody got 100% with those answers.
I definitely don't think so.
So I
The
just
Mars
wonder
bar's safe.
if that was shocking to some, or were people like mostly aware of those facts, were they? I don't know.
And that'd be interesting to know, and also, you know, see what people make of it. See if anyone then says, I really need to learn more, or equally.
Sorry, we just lost Stuart there. So I don't know if you can. You were talking about break and reflection, and so is this about thinking back of what?
Yeah. So I wonder, like I say, I wonder if people were aware of those facts, and how, if not, how did they feel about them? Yeah, because there's some quite big things in there, like life expectancy, and I don't know if people know that having a mental health illness does affect your life expectancy, a severe mental illness.
We've just got Stuart back.
When I was off camera, I said all the most interesting things ever.
Okay, so someone's just thought, I definitely learned a lot and found some of the stats quite shocking.
With those questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we got is it another round now, or what's next?
So yeah, so we're going to do a more, because that was quite intense, we're just going to do a quick general knowledge quiz.
Sounds good.
So it's a quick fire round because we've only got 15 minutes left. Is that right, Jake?
Yeah, but you can go over a little bit. That's okay.
All right then. So hope you've got your intellectual mind switched on. Question 1: where was Mozart born? I expect a big thing, Stuart.
Doncaster.
It's not even close.
Or is he? It's Austria, I guess.
So it's only just come up on workplace, so just to wait a few seconds.
Okay.
Salzburg, is that?
Oh.
It's not from me, by the way. I wouldn't have any idea. And someone else just said Austria. And someone else just said Austria. So.
Okay, so have a look.
Yeah.
It is Salzburg, Austria.
Not Doncaster.
No. Okay. Have a look at question 2. What's the longest play Shakespeare wrote? I'll give you a clue. It's one of his tragedies. Which it doesn't really help that, does it?
So someone's just said Midsummer Night's Dream.
No.
Oh,
She just said, "Oh
glad
no."
I didn't go for that one.
Does he write Romeo and Juliet?
He did
He did,
right.
didn't he? I think.
That's not the one.
Jane said that's not tragic. Midsummer Night's Dream is not tragic.
Ah,
King Lear.
No.
Okay, do you want to give us the answer?
Hamlet.
ah. I'm rubbish at Shakespeare.
And we just had Richard III come through as well.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. It's only just come through. It's okay.
That's all right.
Go on.
Okay. Question 3. Who won the Euro 2016? Which team?
I know it wasn't England.
Never is.
No. I know who it is, yeah. So I'm going to say Portugal.
Is it Brazil? That's not in Europe.
Oh, God. It come on, workplace.
I had to think about
I
that.
get the link because they speak Portuguese in Brazil, even though it's Brazilian Portuguese. So you know, a bonus point. But
and France,
that's
just
if it's right. I think Portugal.
Portugal. You are right, Stuart. Okay. Did anyone get that, Jake?
No.
Question 4. What is the longest river in the world?
See, I automatically think of 2 rivers, and I know I'll be asked this again and then forget it. So I think of like the Nile.
Yeah.
And I think, is it the Congo as well?
See, I'm always torn between
and
there isn't a lot in it, to be fair.
So we've got Nile, and I would say Mississippi.
Okay.
I've got another Nile as well.
Yeah, and that is correct.
Ooh.
And we've got another Nile. They're all piling in now on the Nile.
Cool. Okay.
Hey, my God, I was going to say that.
The study of time is referred to as what?
Ooh. History. No, I know. It's not that.
Do you know what? Stuart, you're not actually far off with the her. It's not history, it's it's an ology at the end.
Histology.
Not his.
The Nile. Histology, someone said.
Nihilology.
Horology.
Horology.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Who said horology?
Jane Mercer in Hampshire, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Horology.
That's a Snickers bar, that is.
And Rachel just got horology as well.
Well done, Rachel. Question 6. Name 3 Roald Dahl books. everyone should get at least 1 or 2. Maybe even more than 3.
Might just need to give a little bit more time for that one.
Okay. There's one I automatically think of that's quite famous, that's been made into films.
Does it have a number 2?
Well, there's been more than one made into.
So does it have like a part 1 and a part 2, the one you're thinking of?
No.
Oh, right, okay.
And I wish there was a sequel.
So we've got James and the Giant Peach, The Big Friendly Giant, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. As someone else has said, Boy, Going Solo, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And Jessica said The Twits, which sounds like an insult, James and the Giant Peach, and George's Marvelous Medicine.
Yeah, I've not heard The Boy and Going Solo for years, yeah.
And we've got The Big Friendly Giant as well.
Could have had all of those. Matilda, The Witches, yeah.
Matilda, Danny, Champion of the World, and James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah, they're all good. All good. Question 7. What's the capital of Chile?
Danny, Champion of the World, just come through.
Yep, that's right.
And the answer to this one's Now You're Asking, someone said.
Really? Is it Santiago?
we just got that come through now.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually coming through quite a lot.
What's that, Santiago?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, next one. Question 8. What's the highest mountain in Britain?
I was just going to say Mulfama. It's not even a mountain, is it?
I do know this one.
So is it Everest?
In Britain?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's on Workplace.
So it's not Everest because it's not
Ben Nevis. We've got Ben Nevis coming up quite a lot.
Yeah, and that's correct. Yeah. Yeah. You said Ben Nevis, Jake. Quite a few.
Jane, and then Ross, and then Jessica's just said Snowdonia, which I probably would have said as well.
Yeah. Question 9. Who was Henry VIII's last wife? There is a rhyme, but I don't know it, but there is one to do it. Work it out.
Thanks.
That's really helpful, isn't it?
What's it rhyme with? I know.
I only know that divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Yeah. That's all I know.
Yeah.
So whoever survived, basically.
Was it Catherine Parr?
Yeah.
Oh, I just need to bring actually, sorry, I've just lost where Workplace is. Give me a second. Yeah, so we got Catherine Parr come up quite a few times.
Okay. And that's correct. Yeah, it was Catherine Parr.
Okay.
And last one. How many players are there in a rugby league team?
None, because they all play football instead.
So just waiting for our quiz experts to give us the answers. 1 second.
The eggheads.
So we've got Catherine, someone. So again, we've got a bit of a delay.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Yeah, it's Catherine.
Now, I know it's not the same as rugby union, is it? Rugby
So we've
union,
got
I think, is
15.
15.
I was going to say, yeah, we've got 15. We've got 15 again.
Slightly different.
So I'd say 11.
I'll go 12.
Okay.
I've got 13 as well.
Oh, who said 13?
Caroline Barrett.
And it's 13.
It's good. I think Caroline's got 2 today.
Well done, Caroline.
I think 15
Well, next
and my
time
son. Oh,
she's
so
at
Caroline
Sisters
didn't get
Advice
it.
in
Sorry.
Norfolk.
No, so Caroline didn't get it. Caroline says, like,
no.
I think 15. My son thinks 13.
Ah.
Her son's
So
genius.
it's Barrett Jr.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to bring Jill and Mick in, and I'm just going to turn your screen off, Sarah. Hi, Mick. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Hi. So yeah, great. I think that was a really good quiz, and really liked obviously your introductions at the start of that as well. Just introducing your sort of backgrounds, you know, and said obviously we hadn't heard from you in the day today, so it was good to hear of your experience as well. So you're both welcome to stay or leave or whatever. That's totally up to you. But we're just going to go on to thank you very much for that quiz. I don't know, both of you had to sort of handle that quite last minute because we just had a change in the structure of the day. So welcome back to Mick and Jill to the session. I think up until 9 now, just for the last hour, you know, and hopefully people on Workplace can and watching online can just engage with us now. I think it'd be really interesting to hear, certainly from the 4 of you who are on here now, and from people watching, what your take-home moments from today have been.
We're all polite, aren't we?
Well, for me, Jake, it's got to be your stamina and your ability to have kept going all day. I think you've been amazing. I've dipped in and out. I've had other things going on during the day, but I think it's about looking after each other, looking out for. I think that's come across in all of the sessions that I've seen. That we're so client focused that actually we need to make sure that we look after each other.
I completely agree. Thank you, Jill. And I've just shared the comment there from Caroline, just saying thank you, Sarah and Stu, for your openness and honesty and sharing your experiences and for the fun quiz. Anyone else want to come in on your sort of take home, Mick?
Well, from my point of view, it sort of reminds me of the good old days of when I worked in the disability sector, which is probably 5-6 years ago now, so time moves on. But the debates are still the same, maybe more polarised perhaps. And I think it just shows you how much there is to do and how it affects all of us in different ways. You know, the broad brush of disability, it has no boundaries. We used to say that years ago about geographic boundaries or colour or creed or anything, or gender, typically. And you know, we've heard stories across the whole day of different experiences and challenges and opportunities. And I think now as an organisation, as a network, we have that opportunity to move forward. And I think, you know, from a commercial point of view, there's a social care market, and I don't apologise for calling it that, because I think we can bring an edge to it that is very much user focused. And as you know, that's my background is a very strong user led advocate. So that's certainly what interests me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mick. Stu, what's your take home moment from today? Sorry, you did
I
unmute, but it
think
doesn't
it's
seem. Oh,
more
sorry, there we
about
go. That's okay.
everyone learning. Okay, yeah, I think it's about learning for everyone, and primarily that mental health is common, just like physical health. And we need to get to that point where it is common to say, my anxiety is playing up or my PTSD is shocking at the moment. Not that I wish it on anyone, but that it's part of everyday talk. Just like someone will say their arthritis plays up at certain times, or that they've got a particular pain that can be a problem at times. So we need to get to that point, and also not just be kinder to each other, but be kinder to ourselves. I know of too many people who will say things like, "Oh, well, shut up now. You don't want to hear what I say." And they don't want to talk about their own problems. And they don't have to talk about their own problems, but it's when they're so critical of themselves for it. And just as we've said earlier on, to make sure we spend time doing things that help us to relax and to work off stress as well, whether it's boxing, like I said about earlier, or meditating, as many have said too. We've got to look after ourselves to then look after other people and be that bit kinder.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stu. That's great. And Rachel's just put up on workplace, and obviously if just the words don't fit in, unfortunately, on the comments, but my take home is a sense of community with other people with mental illness in the service. For such a long time, I genuinely thought that I was the only one. Times have really changed for the better. And she continues to say, so many capable people, so many capable, passionate people here through the day. It doesn't stop us, it gives us an extra dimension. Sarah, what's your take home for the day?
Yeah, I think it's been great. I've been nipping in and out all day and listening to different people and their experiences, and yeah, the genuine feeling of openness has been something else here. I've really enjoyed it, and I think I'd like to thank all of you for contributing. I think it's been great.
Definitely, and definitely to you as well. I think for me, and obviously I text you all this morning on the WhatsApp group, for me it was just about putting it high on the agenda, and anything else that came from that a bonus. And I think it really has been kept on the agenda, certainly throughout most of the day, until unfortunately we had some technical problems. We had 40 to 50 people watching each hour throughout the sessions, and that will have been people dipping in and out of different sessions. So continuously we had a decent amount of people watching, and hopefully we have people watch back, because there'll be certain panels that people are really interested in. And that is then again sort of second take home for me, is the way we obviously structured it on having those different panels and having the different insights related to those panels was also really, really interesting. It sort of broke up that day and gave focus to certain areas throughout, which I think played really well towards engaging with people. And I think it's been good, including things like the mindfulness hour, which, I've been very open about. That's just not something for me. I think it worked really well in the day in terms of engaging people and breaking up the day as well. Jessica's just said, I've only just been able to join, but it's been great to see so many people from across the service coming together. Thank you to everyone who participated. And again, I think that's the other, that's the other good thing, isn't it? That it hasn't felt forced. But also we have had such great coverage from across the service. So we've had lots of national, we've had lots of local, we've had lots of CEOs, we've had lots of non-CEOs joining the call as well. And all of us have just been able to be open and be confident and engage with each other. And I think obviously it's the point of this sort of last hour then is, what is next? Because I promise you it's not another 12-hour live stream in another month or so, because I'm definitely knackered. But it is that idea that, we've done something here to really put it on the agenda. We've had a good amount of people watch. We've had external people getting involved as well. So what can we do in our local sit and device? So Jill and Sue, obviously Sue's not on the call at the moment, but we had a chat before, didn't we, about what can we do maybe as a trio to try some things out, and do some wellbeing work, and do some check-ins with people, encourage some active listening. So there have been some keynotes that I've certainly taken around how we engage with our teams. The session with Alex was also very interesting, particularly on the service user stuff and how we support our clients. And obviously I engaged with Mick and Carol, your session as well, on living with other disabilities, and also mental health, and understanding the longer term impact of that as well, and obviously about supporting people in employment, not just into employment. So I think there's just a lot that we still need to do, isn't there? There's obviously the follow-up conversation, but there is so much more that needs to be done. This surely is just the start of many of those conversations and work that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think we've got our sorry.
Carry on, you carry on.
I think we've got our internal priorities to think about, and how we support our staff, as you say. Then, of course, our clients are very close, because we I think agreed that a high percentage of clients have experience of mental health issues. You know, easily 30%, probably more like 40% of all the people we see have some form, and that will only increase, I think, with what's going on in society at the moment. So, you know, I think how we align our services, I think it's got to be nationally top down, probably, but equally with maybe a national partner. You know, it's not about reinventing that wheel, it's about strengthening what exists. I always believe has got to be the better approach. And if that's reaching out to Paul, who runs Mind or whatever, and, you know, Paul Farmer, and see what can be done, then there's an opportunity there.
I think it's 100% spot on, and I don't know if you managed to catch any of the session I had with Sarah Hughes at the Centre for Mental Health, and obviously that's a policy charities that would be on an R&C research campaigns level, but absolutely, we have to, because we all accept that we see clients on a daily basis with mental health problems, but actually to support people even more, we absolutely need to have those effective partnerships, don't we? And on a local level, I don't know if is there a Mind in Luton? I'm assuming, Mick, if you got a one.
Yeah, well, it's Beds, Luton, Milton Keynes, yeah, all grouped together. Yeah.
So we don't have one. We don't have one in Berkshire, but I'm a trustee of Mind in Woking, which is just about to become Mind in Surrey. So I've joined that to try and see if we can expand there. But a lot of us are in areas without a local mental health organisation to be able to get involved. Just wanted to bring up some more comments. So Alex has said this has brought a real sense of being together in a way I haven't seen before across the service, which is great. And Gary's wrote, I've dipped in and out through the day. Hats off to all contributors and discussion points throughout. Well done, proud to be a part of such an open and collaborative service. And Eleanor's wrote, I agree with all of the above. I feel really inspired by everyone that's spoken today, and feel like it's definitely been something really special that will have a big impact beyond today. Which I think, Trey, that it's obviously a huge credit to everybody that's been involved in the sessions today. Jill, I think you were going to come in next after me.
Yeah, no, I forgot what I was going to say. I think the more we raise the issue of mental health internally and are looking after each other, the better we are able to work with our clients to support them better. I mean, I can remember not so very long ago, people dismissing people with anxiety, depression as it's just another mental health person. And being quite dismissive, and that really sort of grated with me. I have to say it's not in my service here. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we're open about our own mental health, the more we're able to support our clients. And the better connections. I've been amazed since lockdown started. I was invited to be on the local mental health and suicide prevention cell, and that has just opened up all sorts of new doors for our service. And today, before I came on this morning, we had our mental health and suicide prevention cell, and then this afternoon the voluntary sector have got a mental health thematic alliance that I'm part of that as well. And it's just brilliant that all of this has come about since lockdown, and the realization that mental health is crucially important at the moment, and we need to all be working together to support people.
I completely agree, Jill, and thank you. And I think, again, for me, and we touched upon this again, I said with Sarah Hughes before, around what are seen as difficult clients who don't engage, etc. And I've never really liked that sort of terminology or view, particularly when it relates to mental health and the challenges that people face there. But I have also witnessed through different roles, people as soon as they're aware that someone has got mental health difficulties, mental health issues, or if they are a difficult person, and we sort of need to do what we can to see them sort of not here anymore, not in the organisation anymore, because they're too challenging to work with. And the whole point of today, again, was to see this in a positive light. That actually, we've all talked about the positive element of our mental health and how that changes our perspective and our contributions to our organisations and our charities. And as I was saying in the call at 6 with the Charlotte and Sue, was that surely the charity sector here is to disrupt. The charity sector is not here to be a cushy number, to be a nice, polite, rainbow-focused organisation. It's here to say this stuff isn't good enough, and we have to fix it, and we have to fix it at nearly all costs. And mental health obviously is a key aspect of that. Caroline said, I echo the points about how today has created a sense of community. There has been a real willingness to share personal experiences to help others know that they're not alone, which is great as well. Stu or Sarah, do you have anything on this as well?
Yeah, it is talking about how we as an employer go forward. I think one of the things we've got to look at doing is a stronger rollout of mental health first aid. I don't think it's termed correctly mental health first aid, but it's a very good course for awareness, and it does teach a whole load of things. And I think we should set the bar high and say that we should have 1 in 2 trained in it, mainly because it's achievable. If we buy it in bulk, it shouldn't cost too much. And on top of that, if that increases that awareness, and we're then seen as one of the leaders on it, and so if you do go in, if you have psychosis or borderline personality disorder, you're going to a place that will give you support, not just if you're going there for advice, but if you're going to volunteer, or if you're going to go there as a debt advisor or to advise on a range of issues. Then that you're amongst people who understand about mental health and don't see it as a problem, but just another aspect to you, and that they will then help to get the best from you, and you'd be supported with that. So I think we've got to really lead the way on that.
I agree completely. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, training is an issue, especially there are still, I've experienced it with some volunteers, reluctant to take part in the mental health training and things, whether it's a sensitivity thing, I don't know, but obviously I think nowadays it should be compulsory. It shouldn't be, they shouldn't not want to do mental health training. I think they just should do it, and that's that. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you both for that. I am wondering whether, and we don't want obviously meeting overload, but whether one of the follow-ups from today is a meeting that we invite people to from across the network, a Zoom or a Google Meet or something, maybe at some point in August, just to have a chat and talk about our reflections a couple of weeks on from the live stream. Let me just bring Prasanna's comment up. So Prasanna said, I was in and out of the session. I find it informative and inspirational. I'm glad for everyone's positive intention, which is great as well. Thank you, Prasanna. I do wonder, whether we just have some sort of follow-up call and just have a, obviously won't be a recorded one then, but a bit of a chat to talk about what have some of us taken away and delivered in our groups, because we might have gone back and done things locally, and how we can support each other as a bit of a community to engage on mental health.
I think that's a really good idea, Jake.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
If we work together, we should be embedding mental health in all of our offices, and also engaging with the local suicide prevention teams. The work that we do is crucial to support people's positive mental health, and I think we've earned ourselves a place around the table when they're discussing how provision is going to be taken forward.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And there's a couple of comments there from people agreeing, saying they'd want to attend a meeting, so we'll get that set up when we look to. And I think again we can share some of those, you know, because I think we've talked about before about, you know, we need sort of like a best practice mental health policy, don't we, for local citizens advice, things that we can do on the ground, sort of the training things that we've got. Can we share some training between each other? If Jill, you and I and Winchester and maybe others who might be interested, try a bit of a trial and see how we can get that off the ground, and then share that with others, and we can just have a, you know, once a month or once every other month, just to catch up with people from across the network, including national and local, and share some of those skills. Because I think today, I'm just bringing Kate up onto the screen as well. From today, we've had things like I can't remember what the phrase. Hi, Kate, by the way. But there was the point, and Kate might know the answer to this, but someone was saying about a user manual, I think it was referenced as, wasn't it? So what makes you tick? How do you want to be engaging with us, etc. I'm not sure if Kate's, but I'll just bring Kate back on in a second. So there's that, and then there's the wellness action plans as well, the wellbeing action plans that people have talked about. Then there's the active listening, Jill, that you've been talking about, whether you could do a bit of a session with people on that if they wanted a bit of awareness into that. Could we bring in someone senior from mine to have a conversation with people who want to engage in that conversation? I just think that there's plenty that we could be trying to do on this, but it's a whole big project in itself, isn't it? Mental health is not just a sideshow of what we do.
I think we need to try and get some clusters together where the expertise exists, call it champions if you like. Either geographic champions to sort of lead on topics. Otherwise, the danger is we'll have 270 different solutions, and I think we know that can be divisive. And you know, while we're all friends, there's competition as well. I think we understand that. You know, we've got to be sustainable ourselves, and I think, you know, this is one opportunity to pull us all together in the right direction. But it probably needs that national strategy once we're clear what we're lining up, and that's I think a series of national and local staff doing a representation perhaps together.
Yes, I agree. But yeah, I think for me, sorry, Stu, go
on. One of the other organisations, and I do have an interest here, is Rethink Mental Illness, partly because not only do they cover depression and anxiety, but they have the strong knowledge about the severe mental side as well, which when we were talking earlier about how we are now all opening up more about anxiety, we've got a long way to go with bipolar, psychosis and other things, and they could be ideal to help with that kind of thing too.
Yeah, that's a good point, absolutely. Sarah, I know you've got to go, so thank you very much for your participation. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. Kate, I am bringing you up, but it looks like your internet's frozen. I don't know. Oh, no, it looks like you're... Can you hear us? Yes, brilliant. Okay, that's fab. So yeah, I think Stewie, it's a good point on obviously. It's all right, not a problem. I know you've said about rethink, absolutely, it's a good point. But again, maybe this is something we can be bringing up with national and in terms of engaging with different organisations and who can we be having these conversations with. We've actually got Michelle Shambrook, obviously Exec Director of Operations, on as well, and she's just commented saying, I really like the idea of bringing people together in smaller groups and to explore specific topics or areas of interest in more detail. So just throwing out there, because obviously Michelle's on there, is that something that we could just get some support on in terms of organising and facilitating? Because I think it would be really, really useful. I think one of the things I said that for me is a take home is this is, and it's something I've championed all the way along, and I certainly won't shy away from that, but is the beauty of being part of a network. And I've always, I say always, I've only been a CEO now for nearly 2 years, but I am a passionate believer in the strength of the network. And I think there are a lot of times where that does become, there's a lot of tension between that, and there's tension, as you say, Mick, between other local citizens advice, because we are competitors. That's just the nature of the charity sector. But actually, when we do feel like we're in it alone, the idea that there's lots of us who are all fighting the same cause, we all have the same goals, same values, then the other stuff can be forgiven, can't it? Really, we just need to be conscious of it. But actually, the strength really is in supporting each other, in being part of that family unit. And I certainly would like to see Sit and Device as a family. And I think today, for me, has definitely made it feel like that, because it's a bunch of people who've been prepared to be vulnerable. At the hope that it's going to support other people through this journey.
They always say it's a bit lonely at the top, and I used to run an independent charity for 15 years, and you look around and there's no one else to even get necessarily peer support off in the old days. It's a bit different now, but yes, I mean there is the federated state method we have is very powerful, and I've had a few experiences of it, and my mind is it works. I mean, it has tensions, as you say, and I think that's healthy as well. And I'm just trying to work out who in the family we all are, really. You must be my cousin or not uncle or something, so some relative. But yeah, it works. It works.
I agree, absolutely. And Michelle's just said, love to explore that. So this idea of obviously then some support to facilitate some of these conversations will be great. Kate, we were just talking about just before you joined what your take-home moments from today are. And I know that you've done a couple of activities today and you've been moderating some comments. What's your take-home from the live stream today?
Firstly, that you are possibly superhuman. You have a lot of energy, and just want to say thank you for facilitating this, starting this whole process, and for sticking with it from 9 till now. It's incredible. So thank you for setting this up, and everyone else who obviously has taken part today. But I think credit has to go to you, Jake, for kickstarting this whole thing. So that's one thing. I think something that really kind of struck me is how much commonality there is between everyone's experience, and yet there's so much difference as well that's important to respect. And I think even I'm fairly new to the advice. I started in May-ish, so yeah, I'm quite new to the structure and the idea of kind of national and local. And so even the differences there between kind of the work that is done in the local offices and at national, I'm still getting my head around the differences and how they all kind of instill. And so when you kind of difference, and if you kind of add thinking in a more kind of micro level in how everyone's experiences of mental health will differ depending on their own circumstances and where they're coming from, the kind of things I touched on at the start in a coffee morning. We were talking about like how race, age, sexuality can all intersect with mental health, and it's amazing because I think the good part of that is the more we share, we can appreciate those differences. And at the risk of sounding so cheesy, but like there are differences, but the more we share, even where there are differences, the stronger we get. And so even if your experience isn't the same as someone else, that idea of being a space where people can share their thoughts or experiences, and you don't necessarily have to be able to empathize exactly, but just having a completely open space. And again, like I've never worked in a sector or worked in a place where this kind of conversation would really happen. I think there's a lot of lip service that's paid to mental health, which is well intentioned, I think, absolutely, but I think it's very rare. You get people or organizations that kind of follow through on that thing of let's talk about mental health value. Follow through. So that was a bit more than a takeaway. That's a bit of a monologue. Sorry.
No, it's great, and I think they are really good points, which is definitely why we want to do this wrap-up session, because obviously there's a lot that's then happened in the day. And Stu, I just see you're about to head off as well, so thank you for your contributions and for stepping in last minute as well to help with the quiz when we had that unexpected problem. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for running this. You've done a grand job. Catch you later.
Thank you, Stu. Thanks. Right. So yeah, I think 12 hours. I said, you you were on there on Kate, and I think all three of you actually were there on the first call that we had to discuss how we were going to operate this. And 12 hours was just a quick sort of, thumb in the air. Sounds like a good figure to get people engaged, and it really has, and it's got people talking. Centre for Mental Health have been promoting it a lot. They've been really keen to have been part of that conversation. I personally do think, and Kate, I think that's what you've basically just said, is it's representing Citizens of Ice in a very good light, and I hope that it engages people to want to work with us more, to want to volunteer with us more, but also as a client, as someone or a potential client, to be confident that this organisation, this charity, takes mental health very seriously. We want to support people as much as we possibly can, and that we're open enough and vulnerable enough to say, actually, we know we've got lots more to learn. We know we've got lots more to actually do to support people. And Carol, I know, talked about some of them before, Mick, in your session around things like people who rely upon British Sign Language, for example, and how we engage with them. And a lot of those stuff is things that we actively talk about at the moment. There's so much that we still need to do to support our communities, but I don't know why we shouldn't be open about that, and just talk about that and put that out on the agenda.
I think it's about embedding it, really, isn't it? So it becomes second nature. Some things we do automatically, and other things we have to remind ourselves, and that's fine. But as long as it becomes, for everybody, a consistent single service offer, which is the ambition overall, then there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's quite important just to sort of see what you think have been the real successes of today as well, how you would reflect on today. And you say about 12 hours, would you sort of maybe do less or more focused, or there's a learning for all of us, I think, in today. And personally, I think when we all catch up again one day at a conference, it'll be fascinating to see the clusters of who we see and talk to, because each time you meet someone new, you form that different alliance, don't you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I completely agree, and that's why I've certainly enjoyed conference, enjoyed Chief Officers Forum and stuff, and just I do like the whole point, as I said, about England and Wales. This idea that it doesn't matter what part of the country that you are sort of representing and working for, we all are trying to achieve the same thing. And I said the beauty is that so let's use you both, Jill and Mick, as examples. Whatever you're doing in your areas, me copying that takes absolutely nothing away from you. It's actually a bit more delicate when they're neighbours. It's when it's your neighbours and you're competing for the same pots of money. So I've always loved the idea of people far beyond our very limited local boundaries to engage with. But I did want to say that, because we joked about it, Kate, didn't we, this morning, about, becoming a news presenter and delivering Citizens of Ice live news. But I've actually really liked this format, and a lot of people have been privately messaging me on Workplace today saying they've really loved this setup, because obviously, Jill and Mick, you've been coming to the peer support calls. You have 60 people up on the screen, a lot of people in the background, and a couple of people sort of taking up that space. But actually, I think this format does work. Having people comment in and be able to chip in when they feel they want to is great. So I do wonder whether there's and I'm certainly not committing to everything, because I know I've been taking a step back over the last couple of weeks with things. But what I take home from it, Mick, is there a monthly live stream that we do, even if it's not just about mental health, it's actually about each of the network groups, it's about each of the agenda items that sort of come up, that we have this sort of layout where we have a couple of people on for just 1 hour who have a chat about a subject, but we encourage people to have it in their diary. Sorry,
something thematic, or so people have the heads up and they can dip in knowing it's for them or not for them. That they're not so much forewarned, but they know it's exactly what their issue is or challenge. I'm a great lover of regionalism as well, where, sometimes distance is too far. The issues we have and neighbours next door we may not relate to so closely. I think there are issues there. That's about the wider network, which I know Michelle is looking at as a whole. I think there's an opportunity. We're into the new chapter, aren't we, for the whole sector of society, but certainly our sector. And how do we embrace this as our new chapter as well? We've got, I've always wondered if even our future for advice it's still current, but we need to remodel ourselves against that in this new climate. So while we may not change our overall strategies at national level, how we fit into it, because I think the needs of people coming at us are going to change hugely. We worry about the suppressed demand, don't we, and the impact. And I've just done a quarterly report today, and we're talking about, that may be a trickle rather than a tidal wave, but you can guarantee it's going to be more complex, and people be in deeper situations, and issue counts will only go up, I think. We're in a false position that will exacerbate things, and then it's how you pick the pieces up, isn't it? And I don't think we can set our stall out entirely at the moment, but we've got to be agile to what the future holds. And I think we will see greater incidents of mental health, and we said about the link between debt and mental health. And I think we'll see that across a few of our services as well, won't we?
Yeah, I completely agree. And Karen's just wrote on Workplace. I agree. I've joined this really late, but the format is great and it's really engaging. And Mick, I think, as you said, we sort of need to be on top of everything, but it's okay to be reminded sometimes of things that we are missing and what things we can do to put in place. And that's why I said, I think, I've talked about this, and Kate, I've probably messaged you about it before, but I've certainly talked to all the people who are part of the Workplace team. As long as I've just been a fan of, I'll dip in and out of lots of different live streams that happen, even if it's something that we just don't engage with as an office, because it's people to have up in the background and sort of think about it and think about whether there is a place for us to be involved in this. And I just do like that idea. Maybe it's obviously something I'll feedback to Jessica, the Director of Comms and Engagement, but if there was just that one slot, that both national and local, because I'm a big fan, it shouldn't just be national, it should just be local. It should be across both, because we've all got things to add. If we can have that one slot where we do say, do you know what, well, in May it is about health, but in April it's going to be about Black, Asian, minority, ethnic issues and how we support people through that. And we've obviously had the bullying concerns recently in the reports that have come from people who are facing discrimination through that. And having these different topics on the agenda and having people lead them then who have a passion. So obviously for me it's been mental health, but that wouldn't mean it's appropriate for me to sort of spearhead each one, but that we create that place for them to do that. Because the reason we've got today is because we've decided we just want to do it. We've got on with it and we've done it, and people have got together to support it. But if we had it in place and we motivated and encouraged people to be part of that, and we use the wider network to advertise it, so it was worthwhile for people doing, I just don't know how it could be a bad or wrong idea, because then people who've got expertise in that field, and then us can join in the comment section and add our contributions, can be inspired in the network and the national teams to move forward on those issues and at least put it very firmly on the agenda. So I think I said that would just be certainly a take on from me. And then there's little individual things that I definitely want to do as a sitting device in Wokingham. And there's things that I want to tighten up. So, for example, we want to do the mental health first aid in the future, have a review around that and what we can offer on that as well. But I said the big thing has been about feeling like it is a very supportive network, that it is a community, that it is a family, that it hasn't mattered whether you're national or local or whether you're in Luton, Cornwall or Wokingham. We've all had positive contributions to add, and we've all wanted to move forward with this issue. And I just think there's got to be a big strength in that.
I think you're absolutely right, Jade. Going back to your sort of monthly having a slot, for me, the main benefit of people or whatever is finding out what other offices are doing, what projects they're running, how are they helping people with mental health issues, how are they interacting with the same communities, that sort of thing. And I come away thinking, right, that project isn't exactly right for me, but I can adapt it and we can run something similar. So I think just focusing on one particular topic every month would be really handy. And I sort of caught part of Rushmore's presentation on what they're doing with mental health, and I found that really inspiring. And going away and wanting to do something a similar sort of project. But you only find out about those things if you can actually talk to the people who are running them So it's really important when whoever it is designing these, they get the people with the knowledge and who are actively running successful projects.
That's great. Thank you, Jill. And Kate?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo everything that's been brought up, but also particularly from my point of view, I think the mix of local and national is really amazing, particularly as someone who's new to citizen advice, so new to everything, but learning more about how local offices work again, or what the kind of the projects ongoing, and kind of getting to put some faces to names can only be a good thing. And I think this format, this kind of people dropping in and out, giving people who wouldn't necessarily have the, I mean, I know for a fact I would never, unless this opportunity was presented to myself, I wouldn't decide to do a live stream. But I think it's a really nice way of kind of giving people a bit of impetus and a bit of like an opportunity for teams that necessarily wouldn't think that they wouldn't occur to these sort of things. So how we kind of structure, or how it is structured, these kind of monthly slots of whatever, I'm not sure. But I would really be interested in being part of the conversation going forward, just even if it's just kind of supporting from a workplace side of things. The more, it's never going to be a bad thing to have conversations. And again, from the point of view of mixing local and national, I think it's just a nice thing.
Yeah, I agree completely, definitely, the mixture, but I do think, because it just touches upon mixed point of obviously 12 hours versus whatever. I think the 12 hours has definitely been worth it, because I think so much has come from each of those panels, but obviously it just would be impossible or not a good idea to do that all. So that's why I think the idea of give a bit of time to plan for that sort of next month's one, and we know what that agenda is for the next 6 months or so, and we can plan the slot 6 months ahead. We can identify people with those passions, and then Jill, as you said, I was going to say if there's an office that then got a connection to that, but it is that idea that we can have up to 10 people on this screen, and then people engage in the comments section. So you can have guaranteed slots. So you can have a director, you can always have a national staff member, you can always have a local, you can always have a volunteer, and you can have these slots where you say each time we talk about this subject, we are giving a slot to each of those groups of people, so that everyone's got a voice at that table. And again, it's an internal conversation, because obviously this has been put out publicly. Alex has said, I think, Jill, on your point, remote working is a fantastic opportunity to establish shared interests and links and not be restricted by geography.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. Some of the best ideas I've had have come from completely the other end of the country. Because often, I mean, I know my geography is much closer to some of the offices up in the north or the east, and here I am way down in the southwest. So it's about finding an office that is yours in terms of demographics and geography.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's just a bit of a problem with your mic as well, Jill, by the way. I don't know what it is, but
is that better?
No, not really, but we can still hear you, but I don't know what it is. I just wondered if the three of you, and I'll try and think of one myself as well. Well, I think I've sort of talked about it, but what are you going to do next? What's your sort of immediate thoughts from this? So for me, it is just to steal we try and get a couple of us together, and we said it could be 4 or 5 of us, but to just do some training on active listening, and then we do some form of just a trial procedure or trial policy on well-being calls with each of our team, and see how it goes, and have a bit of a review of it, have someone nominated in our organisation, whatever it is we're going to do, and then share that learning with the network. I think that's something I'd like to explore in the immediate sort of next 2 or 3 months. Jill?
I think it's something that I think we talked about this morning. I think it was Sue who was saying that they have a sort of morning catch up with all the volunteers, and we've gone to a weekly catch up, but it tends to be mainly staff who dial in. So I'm going to tomorrow morning have a chat with all of my supervisors to say how about having a 10-minute catch up on Teams for everybody. And also we were looking at mental health first aid training and actually training one of our trainers to be a deliver the training. And I think I just need to get on with doing that and sorting it out. It's going to be ever more important that we have in-house experts who can provide that support both to their colleagues and to our clients.
Sorry, your mic's dipping out again just near the end, but we did get most of that. And Kate, what's your sort of immediate take home? Or next step, should I say?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, just give my mic. I think the Norfolk internet is going against me. Yeah, I think next steps. I definitely want to explore mental health first aid. I know it's been mentioned a lot, and it's definitely something just personally I'm interested in doing, but I think it could be a really beneficial thing. And I know a couple of people on my team have also expressed interest in it, just as a kind of a concept and something to look into. So that's definitely first port of call. I'm also really keen to make sure the helping each other group on workplace, which I believe that Jake, you set up or kind of pioneered. I'm really keen to take a fresh look at it and see how it could, while kind of preserving it as a space that is peer-to-peer and not in a way trying to take over or manage it, but having kind of a fresh look at that as a space and thinking how could it, as a team, I'm thinking it very much in a work way, as the digital workplace team, what can we be doing to really maximize that space? Because I think this conversation this whole day has shown there's such kind of like an appetite, I guess, for these conversations, for the ideas, and I think we've got a really good opportunity with the Helping Each Other group to create kind of an extension of these conversations and hopefully in a way help them live on or kind of continue in a different way in workplace. So that's something I definitely want to kind of scope out and see what we can do as a digital workplace, my team name, can do to help this kind of conversation keep going.
No, and I completely agree. And I think on the Helping Each Other group particularly, the idea behind that was actually to promote mentoring. So it's a similar point. It was about saying, look, there's definitely there's a craving of people to help. There's lots of people who want to help. There's also lots of people who are either newer to the service or want to make progress in the service. But at a Citizens Advice our size with 5 full-time equivalent staff, we don't have as much to offer to them as what you've seen the appetite is today from the live stream alone and from the comments that we've had of people wanting to get involved and people wanting to offer advice and support. So the initial idea was simply just to try and encourage mentoring relationships from that. So a fresh look on that will absolutely be very welcome because, as you say, there's definitely a huge desire. And I've always been a believer as well in, I think the first big sign of that for me was being at a chief officers forum, and I was sitting on a table, and obviously we just look at each other then as you're all CEOs of Citizens Advice across the country, and this person was a former superintendent in the police force, and I was thinking there'll be Citizens Advice out there that are looking at contracts with the police commissioner, with funds from the police commissioner, or projects that engage with the police, and we've certainly engaged with some of ours around when someone stole something from the shop. We'd much rather they call us and try and engage the client in support with us than arrest them and whatever. Wouldn't that be an ideal person to talk to about the structures and the way in and the things that they need? And we just don't do enough of that. We see people as their role and not as all of the other experience that they bring. And Mick, I know you're an architect. Unfortunately, I don't have hundreds of thousands of pounds to get a new building. But again, I think it's another key example of even just having a chat with you about redesigning things. It's surely an odd thing to do.
I thought that's just my fees. You'd need the money. I thought you were saying, but But yeah, I mean, it's like any organization. You know, there are people who have skills that they're not either fully utilizing, or how you've evolved from a former, you know, experience, and I was going to say former life, but you know what I mean, the former career, perhaps, you know, the different experiences, and how do we harness that, you know? And while I may not be able to contribute to Wokingham's grand design for something, you know, what I could tell you is the best way to go around about it. You know, I mean, other people can as well, but you know, within the family there is expertise, and you know, I'm a great believer in what can we do internally to help ourselves first, rather than either buying services in or what exists within the notion of the family. I think from my perspective, just something that it's the same theme that's coming through, that we haven't explored mental health first aid training, and that now is something really to take away. We are in, I think, training mode as organisations anyway. We're doing a lot more training than we probably ever used to, and because the format's more accessible at the moment, or has to be. So that's an opportunity, but we also have a strategic ambition around mental health and a peer-led group locally, and to reach out. And what I have always heard about but rarely seen is co-production, and that's where the services are shaped by service users themselves. And you know, sometimes in projects you get that ambition of trying to get user involvement. And it's easy to write, but it's damn difficult to achieve and do, because people, by definition of their own issues and mental health, sometimes are not in the right position to engage, or they're in moving on, or they're now in full-time work or something. So it's really hard for some people to give back. But I think trying to get some true co-production is going to be, I think, an ambition. All of these things blend together, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely another key point. And John's just wrote on Workplace, well done to everyone that has contributed. I've managed to dip in a few times, and each time there's been an interesting and relevant discussion going on. And I'm really glad that's a good summary, because it was, especially from the planning meeting we had, it was the objective that, and maybe someone has watched 12 hours, and well done to them, because it's probably just as exhausting as sitting here being part of it. But the idea is, again, that you dip in and out, and there would be something that's relevant to the conversation. So we've obviously achieved that, if that's the case that John's sort of highlighting there. And then, as you can see on the comments that we've got up on our screen, you've got Bridge and Sue saying, you know, about agreeing to take this stuff forward and wanting to trial and share techniques, which will be great as well. So we'll certainly look to have some sort of follow-up meeting on this. I'm certainly hoping anyone who's watching that is external to Sit and Device is more interested in the work that we do and feels more engaged with our work as well, and wants to join us in whatever capacity they can. And that's specifically also if you're a client and you're someone who's or a potential client, and you're thinking that you need help and Sit and Device has just never really appealed to you for whatever that reason is, that we've been able to change that as well. Karen's just said, hi all, I just want to share that, and I'm going to say this completely wrong, but it's Rhondda and Taff, I think, which is in Wales, have worked on some co-production work, and we'll be happy to share our opinion on this if it will be useful. So Mick, I think we've got someone linked up there to share some experience.
Exactly, the family has the answer, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So if we can link you up with Karen Taylor, Karen, if you can speak to Mick at Luton, that would be fantastic. And Kate, that's your helping each other group set up completely there. You know, that's it in action, isn't it? So yeah. We've got the last sort of 8 minutes. So are there any other sort of final closing comments from each of you on anything that you want to share?
I think the breadth of today has been astonishing. You know, not least of all you driving it for the whole duration, but the breadth of discussion, and you know, from an idea a few weeks ago, not very long really, was it? You know, to fruition now, and you know, with the thing about any form of media is a range of voices and experiences. That's what makes it interesting, and you know, I keep seeing the little live flash at the top of your picture. It looks like breaking news. I keep thinking, what does it say?
Yeah.
But so definitely a I have a face for radio, whereas you're made for TV, I think. But you know, I think it's certainly worked, and you know, if it raises more questions than answers, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we apologise for that. And you know, I've met 2 or 3 new people, even though I've been around now for 3 years, that you know I didn't know before, and that's always helpful. And from names or faces to sort of personalities and characters, so that's all very good. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, Mick. It's been great. Thank you. Jill or Kate, do you want to go next?
I would second what Mick said, and just to say that a lot of my team have actually been dipping in and out today and commented how useful they found it. And I shared it with all the mental health partners that we work with down here, and they were absolutely bowled over that Citizens Advice had got themselves together to do a 12-hour live stream. They couldn't believe what was going on. So I think you've done the whole organisation a real credit, Jay.
Thank you, Jill. That's great. I know it's good. It's good to share that the mental health. I've seen some of them on Twitter sharing it today, so they've been very, very positive about that, which is fantastic.
I stuck it on LinkedIn this morning, and it's had the biggest shares of any of my posts for months. So.
There we go. We're making Jill popular on LinkedIn. That's definitely a new business consultancy firm I can set up for myself there. And Kate.
Yeah. Just echoing everything that everyone's already brought up. It's been such a fantastic day. So many ideas, and there's a lot to be said for. The short amount of time that you managed to turn this around can't be kind of like overstated, and there's a lot to be said for just the power of like gumption and just kind of getting stuff done. I think it's a really, really fantastic lesson that I'm certainly going to bear in mind going forward. Next time I have a project or something, I'm like, oh, should I? And if I ever get kind of cautious, like, well, we did a live stream, we did, you know, it can be done. I think that's a really great testament to kind of collaboration, working together, and like what can be achieved. So that's amazing, just as a takeaway. And I agree with the comment Mike made about breadth. Absolutely, there has been that, but by the same token, we've barely scratched the surface in some ways. I feel like we could have easily done. I mean, perhaps we're a bit tired, but I think given there could have been more panels on different topics and different aspects of mental health and how it intersects with so many things. So I think, again, maybe thinking about next time, probably slightly too early to say about next time, but if ever there definitely is scope, I think, to have we could do this again and have complete different conversation, because we could touch on so many different other things, and I think it's amazing that we can do that. And yeah, so I guess my kind of closing thought is that it's amazing that we've touched so much, and there's still so much still to do, which is, I think, inspiring. I think it's an encouraging thing to think about.
I agree completely. Thank you, Kate. And Tracy's just wrote here, great work, Jake, and everyone that took part. It got me thinking about what I can do in my own charity organisation and for my own mental health. Excellent. So stealing some email ideas. I think that comes from a previous session about deleting email apps from your phone and never looking at emails ever again. And Alex has wrote, which is a bit extreme, don't take that one. And Alex has just wrote on Workplace, we also had some funders tune in who were very impressed, which is always a good sign, isn't it, if you've got funders impressed by things that we're doing. But Kate, I completely agree, and I just wanted to touch upon something very quick, because there was a bit of a debate that I had with myself around whether we did invite someone external or not to take part, because obviously it was a Citizens Advice session. But I think having Sarah Hughes on as well, who's obviously extremely passionate about mental health, is very policy driven, but also got that sort of real practical experience, was really useful as well, because she gave an insight into each of the panels that we'd had, some of the subjects that we were touching upon, and gave a bit more of an authoritative voice on some of these matters. So I think that really helped as well. But I do think, again, if we ever, you know, even if it is just the hour ones that we do in the future, having, you know, Jill, your input from Samaritans was really useful as well. So having someone from Samaritans maybe come along who's still doing the role, and Mick, you've talked about someone senior from Minds as well, the Minds Associations joining. I think that would be also really powerful to show the because I think that's how I portray Citizens of Ice anyway, certainly in my area, is we are not a charity that then steals you and keeps you within our arms and you're not allowed to go anywhere else. You know, we are very much a gateway to other places, aren't we? So we'll do what we're good at, but we've got no problem at all with signposting you or helping you get into another service or another organisation. So we really should be able to do that with other key charities as well. Breach, and I'll put this up because it's going to be a question we're asked a lot. This session is recorded. Unfortunately, it's in 2 bits because we suddenly learned today, Kate, that you can only do 8 hours live stream, which is important to know for the future. Otherwise, it cuts you off. So we've got two slots, but on all of the channels, Workplace, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and that was it, I think, are all recorded, and you'll be able to just search back on them. So what we'll do in the blog is which we hope to release tomorrow or Thursday, we'll time them so that you can click the timer for each panel and zoom straight to that one. We've got 2 minutes left, and it'll be shocking for us to cheat 2 minutes earlier than the whole 12 hours that we promised to do. So certainly while you 3 are on, and obviously the rest of the team that have been part of it today, I do think it's been superb. I think it's been a really good, engaging, supportive, positive day. And I think what's really, really key about that is mental health isn't hardly ever a positive, engaging, inspiring topic, is it? It's normally a very deep, emotional, upsetting topic because we all live with this. That's a really sad thing to experience, but actually we've been able to shine a positive light on it and be positive about it and be determined to actually do stuff about it. So that's obviously thanks to all of you for taking part.
Well, I think certainly the reactions that I've seen on Twitter and LinkedIn today as well, my own accounts, it's significant. So people are interested. It is topical, bang up to date. And I think we've set our stall out. We now need to capitalise, as you say. And it's one of the things where actions is greater than words, isn't it? So we are into the doing.
Yeah.
Will be the next challenge, but that's the exciting opportunity.
I completely agree. And on that note, we're at 9 o'clock. I can finally go to bed and go to sleep and get some dinner and do all that sort of stuff. But again, thank you all very much for taking part. Thank you everyone for watching, because obviously that's just as important. Otherwise, we would have just been all talking to ourselves, which is definitely not fun. But thank you. We hope we'll talk about this subject again. Thank you, everyone.
Keep well, everyone.
Bye.